you're one of our Patreon sponsors or YouTube sponsors, be sure to check out the new video that's available talking about our poopy president. No, I don't mean that in a bizarre or even sarcastic way. It turns out that the number of people who are now hospitalized, many of them are going to need kidney transplants all around the United States. I mean, literally, their lives have been devastated and wiped out, is the result of a decision that Donald Trump made to tell his EPA to allow more cow poop, basically, to be intentionally or unintentionally used for irrigation of crops, specifically romaine lettuce. And thus, you are getting poisoned because he wants deregulation. Isn't that cool? Check out the video. It's coming up for all of our Patreon and YouTube sponsors. And thanks so much for supporting the program. Our book today is Why Women Have Better Sex Under Socialism and Other Arguments for Economic Independence by Kristen Godsey. And this is from the introduction titled, You Might Be Suffering from Capitalism. The argument of this book can be summed up succinctly. Unregulated capitalism is bad for women. And if we adopt some ideas from socialism, women will have better lives. If done properly, socialism leads to economic independence, better labor conditions, better work-family balance, and yes, even better sex. Finding a way into a better future requires learning from the mistakes of the past, including a thoughtful assessment of the history of 20th century state socialism in Eastern Europe. That's it. If you like the idea of such outcomes, then come along for an exploration of how we might change things. If you're dubious because you don't understand why capitalism as an economic system is uniquely bad for women, and if you doubt that there could ever be anything good about socialism, this short treatise will provide some illumination. If you don't give a whit about women's lives because you're a gynophobic right-wing internet troll, save your money and go back to your parents' basement right now. This isn't the book for you. Of course, some might argue that unregulated capitalism sucks for almost everyone, but I want to focus on how capitalism disproportionately harms women. Competitive labor markets discriminate against those whose reproductive biology makes them primarily responsible for childbearing. Today, this means humans who get pink hats in the hospital and the letter F next to the name on the birth certificate, as if we've already failed by not coming into the world as a boy. Competitive labor markets also devalue those expected to be the primary caregivers of children. Although societal attitudes have evolved in this regard, our idealization of motherhood means that most of us still believe that baby needs mama, a whole lot more than papa, at least until the child is old enough to play sports. Others will argue that unregulated capitalism is not bad for all women. Yes, for those women lucky enough to sit at the top of the income distribution, the system works pretty well. Although women at the executive level still face gender pay gaps and remain underrepresented in leadership positions, on the whole, things aren't too shabby for the Sheryl Sandbergs of the world. Of course, sexual harassment still hinders progress, even for those at the top, and too many women believe that if you want to run with the big dogs, you may have to suck it up and ignore the groping and unwanted advances. And race plays an important role as well. White women do a lot better in aggregate than do women of color. But when we look at society as a whole, on average, women are comparatively worse off in countries where markets are less encumbered by regulation, taxation, and public enterprises than they are in nations where state revenues support greater levels of redistribution and larger social safety nets. Choose your data source, and you find the same story. Unemployment and poverty plague women with children. Employers discriminate against women without children because they might have them in the future. In the United States in 2013, women over the age of 65 suffered from poverty at much greater rates than men and dominated those in the category of extreme poverty. Globally, women face higher rates of economic deprivation. Women are often the last to be hired and the first to be fired in cyclical downturns. And when they do find employment, bosses pay them less than men. When states need to slash government spending on education, health care, or old age pensions, mothers, daughters, sisters, and wives must pick up the slack, diverting their energy to care for the young, the sick, and the elderly. Capitalism thrives on women's unpaid labor in the home because women's care work supports lower taxes. Lower taxes mean higher profits for those already at the top of the income ladder, mostly men. But capitalism was not always so savage. Throughout much of the 20th century, state socialism presented an existential challenge to the worst excesses of the free market. The threat posed by Marxist ideologies forced Western governments to expand social safety nets to protect workers from the unpredictable but inevitable booms and busts of the capitalist economy. After the Berlin Wall fell, many celebrated the triumph of the West, consigning socialist ideas to the dustbin of history. But for all its faults, state socialism provided an important foil for capitalism. It was in response to a global discourse of social and economic rights, a discourse that appealed not only to the progressive populations of Africa, Asia, and Latin America, but also to many men and women in Europe and Western Europe and North America, that politicians agreed to improve working conditions for wage laborers, as well as to create social programs for children, the poor, the elderly, the sick, and the disabled, mitigating exploitation and the growth of income inequality. Although there were important antecedents in the 1980s, once state socialism collapsed, capitalism shook off the constraints of market regulation and income redistribution. Without the looming threat of a rival superpower, the last 30 years of global neoliberalism have witnessed a rapid shriveling of social programs that protect citizens from cyclical instability and financial crises, and reduce the vast inequality of economic outcomes between those at the top and those at the bottom of the income distribution. For much of the 20th century, Western capitalist countries also endeavored to outdo the East European countries in terms of women's rights, fueling progressive social change. For example, the state socialists in the USSR and Eastern Europe were so successful at giving women economic opportunities outside the home that initially, for the 2 decades after the end of World War II, women's wage work was conflated with the evils of communism. The American way of life meant male breadwinners and female homemakers. But slowly, socialist championing of women's emancipation began to chip away at the Leave It to Beaver ideal. The Soviet launch of Sputnik in 1957 spurred American leaders to rethink the costs of maintaining traditional gender roles. They feared the state socialists enjoyed an advantage in technological development, and why women have better sex under socialism.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. Boy, the news is just getting more and more bizarre. I mean, here, first of all, it's Anything Goes Friday, so, anything you'd like to talk about, feel free. 202-808-9925 is our telephone number. But I wanted to go through some of the news of the day. Donald Trump, that's incredible. I got, Fred Flintstone got an email from Donald Trump overnight. And because Fred Flintstone donated $5 to Trump's campaign when he, was in the primary back in the day. And so Fred keeps getting emails. So Fred, Democrats have illegitimately disinvited me from making my scheduled and very important State of the Union address. Very is in all caps. The State of the Union is not, the entire sentence is in all caps, in bold. The State of the Union is not for liberal obstructionists, it's for the American people. Nancy Pelosi asked me to reschedule the State of the Union address given the security concerns, in quotes, regarding the government shutdown. What about the real, all caps, security concerns at our southern border? What about the real, all caps, security concerns of American citizens and their loved ones? The only reason Democrats and Nancy Pelosi want to reschedule, in quotes, my State of the Union address is because they know I will say what I've always said about our southern border, the truth. Well, it turns out that he's actually lying through his teeth. And everybody in the administration knew about it. Kirstjen Nielsen has been lying through her teeth. Senator Jeff Merkley this morning released an absolute bombshell. It was leaked to him by somebody inside the Department of Homeland Security, the DHS. And in this bombshell report, which came from a little over a year ago, is from December of 2017, this is a quote from Jeff Merkley, Senator Merkley, about this. This document shows Trump administration staffers plotting to create a humanitarian crisis at the border. This memo shows that the administration was treating children as political pawns, not vulnerable human beings. That's reprehensible. We must end this Trump war on migrant children. I would say refugee children. He also, the press release says this document proves that the administration was in fact intentionally and deliberately planning all along to separate families and create a crisis in the southern U.S. border. But you have DHS Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen saying before Congress, we do not have a policy of separating families at the border, period. That's June 17th, 2018. Under oath, December 20th, 2018. Now, this is 6 months and 12 months after they put this policy into place. She's lying through her teeth. She says, I am not a liar. We never had a policy for family separation. Here's the actual quote from the memo. Item 2, separate family units. And, you know, it's basically announced the DHS is considering separating family units, place the adults in adult detention, place the minors under the age of 18 in the custody of HHS, and begin separating family units. Done. Number 2, false claim that Obama did it. No, under the Obama administration, the only time children were separated from their parents is if they determined that A, the parents actually represented a threat to the children, or B, the person representing themselves as a parent wasn't actually a parent. Was actually somebody who, you know, had stolen a kid or something. I mean, it was rare, but they found them. So another lie, which you will hear repeated on Right Wing Hate Radio and on Fox News regularly. Another lie from Trump that family separation was not implemented as a deterrent. Again, Nielsen, line, you know, right, she says, I find that offensive, that suggestion. Well, here is the quote from the memo itself. The increase in prosecutions would be reported by the media, and it would have substantial deterrent effect. Another lie from the Trump administration, violent criminals are forcing the administration to expand detention facilities. In fact, the memo says any and all efforts should be made to criminally prosecute those who smuggle their kids into the United States. So the criminals that they're expanding the detention facilities for are people who tried to bring their children into the United States. The administration knew under their family separation policy that you'd have an increased need for detention space. In fact, this is from the memo. I would suggest referring sponsors for criminal prosecution. This would result in a deterrent impact on the sponsors as well. So, number 1, Trump's fundraising email. And by the way, this is a fundraising email, not anything else. Trump's fundraising email says, you know, basically lies. I mean, not basically, just right up front lies. And then he says, Democrats panicked when I became president. Democrats panicked when I gave my presidential address last week. And now they're panicking at the thought of me speaking to you and your family in 2 short weeks. The reason for all this liberal hysteria is because they're finally being exposed for hiding the truth for decades, Fred. Right. And then we discover, speaking of lies, that Nancy Pelosi was actually going to be flying commercial when Trump said, no, you can't have a government plane, along with a congressional delegation, because it's pretty important to find out what's going on in Afghanistan, meet with the troops, meet with the people on the ground. She wanted to interview the people from the government of Afghanistan. They were going to stop in Brussels. They had to do that for pilot sleep, but they also wanted to stop and talk to the leaders of NATO and say, no, our crazy president is not speaking for us when he says repeatedly, let's pull out of NATO. NATO, of course, was created solely for the purpose of holding back the old Soviet Union. So he's lying about that. And then Michael Cohen, you know, then it's released. It was Jason Leopold had this story, and I think it was Vox. The story came out that Michael Cohen was a witness to efforts by Donald Trump to tell basically Michael Cohen to lie before Congress. And not only Cohen. This was apparently, you know, and by the way, this is not from Cohen's testimony. I mean, Giuliani and Trump's spokesperson were both on Fox this morning, Giuliani yesterday, saying, oh, Cohen's just lying. And Trump tweeted that this morning. He's lying again. He's trying to reduce his sentence. Check out his father-in-law, right? So here's, you know, mafia boss Trump. And it's not the Italian mafia. It's the oligarch mafia from the former Soviet Union. That's who Trump is a part of. That's the mafia that he's a part of. This is the oligarch mafia don who's now sitting in the White House saying, hey, nice family there. Be ashamed if anything happened to your father-in-law, Michael. Really? Well, it turns out it wasn't Cohen's testimony at all. It was documents and recordings that are in the possession of Robert Mueller saying that Donald Trump ordered these people to lie before Congress, including Cohen and his son and his daughter. And speaking of his daughter, Ivanka Trump issues carefully worded denial of BuzzFeed. Oh, it was BuzzFeed. I said Vox. BuzzFeed report on Trump Tower, Moscow. Now, listen to this carefully. It's like, you know, the guy driving the getaway car in a bank robbery, his excuse is always, well, I was only minimally involved. I wasn't there for the robbery. I was just outside, you know, in the car. Here's the quote. Ms. Trump did not know about this proposal until after a non-binding letter of intent had been signed, never talked to anyone outside the organization about the proposal, never visited the projected project site, in other words, Moscow, and was only minimally involved. Yeah, just like that guy driving the getaway car. I was only minimally involved. This is nuts. I mean, this is just plain old flat out nuts. And now Nancy Pelosi, because Trump leaked that they were going to Afghanistan. I mean, it's something you just never do, right? If Barack Obama, as president, had leaked a trip to Afghanistan by a bunch of Republicans, he would have been impeached the next day. I mean, this is blowing up national security. That, in my opinion, that in and of itself is a crime against our republic. So anyhow, that's the stuff that's at the top of the news right now. That said, as I said, it's Anything Goes Friday. We can talk about whatever you would like. Mike in Lomita, California, listening on KPFK. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, I got ticked off by a caller earlier in the week who was complaining about the U.S. government possibly getting involved in health care because it's not one of the specifically enumerated functions in Article 1. Well, I think if any originalist or strict constructionist is true to himself or herself, they should also be originalist about the medical care itself. Now, in 1788, we did not have cases of Ebola getting on jet planes and coming to the U.S. within hours. So I guess there wasn't any need for a U.S. Public Health Service or a Centers for Disease Control.
Actually, it was 1789, maybe 1790, the year after the Republic was founded, George Washington authorized medical services in Washington, D.C. for veterans and for the poor. We had government-funded health care literally the first year or two of the Republic.
But spurred by that comment, I looked up our founding father physician, Dr. Benjamin Rush.
Yep, good friend of Jefferson.
Surgeon General, the Continental Army Medical Director of the Corps of Discovery of Lewis and Clark in 1803. Yep. And his favorite treatment, if you showed up in his emergency room complaining of belly pain and vomiting and all that, he would probably have bled you because that was his preferred method of treatment for yellow fever victims, or he would have loaded you up with heavy metals like mercury.
Right.
In fact, he supplied these pills for the Lewis and Clark expedition, which were more than 50% mercury, and archaeologists today have been able to trace the precise route of Lewis and Clark by tracing the mercury from these from these laxative pills that he prescribed for the.
Oh, that's amazing.
Travelers.
You know, there's a story behind that. Mercury was called quicksilver, and the doctors of the age used it because it stimulates the immune system. The body knows that it's being poisoned, and it just freaks out. It kicks into a high fever response, which is actually antibacterial. You know, it's like it helps the body fight off bacterial infections. The problem is it poisons you with mercury. But they didn't know that at the time, and that's why they were called quick doctors or quicksilver doctors. And that phrase over the years evolved into quack doctors. That's where the phrase quack doctor came from. As you know, modern drugs were being developed in the late 19th, early 20th century, penicillin and whatnot, and coming into the market in a big way, and the medical profession was starting to license itself and things like that. They referred to the old mercury doctors, you know, like Ben Rush, as quack doctors. Or quick doctors.
You know, something else they didn't have in Dr. Rush's age was the $500,000, and I've seen cases that probably were up into the $1 million range of medical bills for people who have severe injuries and require a lot of intense treatment. Yeah, absolutely. Well said, Mike. Thank you. Thank you for listening to KPFK, and thanks for the call. It's Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program, the place where smart people get their news. We'll be picking up your phone calls, and I got a special little rant here about liberals and Trump supporters in a little while. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So is Donald going to wiggle out of this one too? I mean, how many crimes has this guy committed that we know about, just right out in the open? and welcome back. Whew, what an amazing time we live in, you know? John in Marne, Michigan. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, happy TGIF.
Yeah, there you go. What's up, John?
Hey, I want to talk about a real crisis instead of the manufactured one about the southern border wall. And that I read an article out of Common Dreams with staff writer Julia Conley that was put out on Monday. Mm-hmm. And it's basically stats, that the real crisis that we have is 70% of us think that the for-profit healthcare industry is in crisis, and that she mentioned that the candidates for president shouldn't run away from this because there's 84% Democrats and 56% Republicans that want this.
That's correct.
And and we know where the Republicans come from on this. And she mentioned that Steny Hoyer prefers to wait for Trump to propose reforms to the ACA. And this was after the blue wave passed.
Yeah, no, Steny Hoyer's he's a middle of the road corporate Dem. I don't know how to say it without it sounding too pejorative, but I doubt Steny Hoyer will ever advocate for Medicare for all until there's an absolute consensus. Then he'll jump on the train.
Hey, Tom, I heard, I think these were talking points. It might have been 3 Sundays ago on the Sunday morning talk shows. Meet the Press had Senator Roy Blunt from Missouri on there, and he threw out that Medicare for all will amount to Medicare for none. And then what really caught my eye later on the day on CBS, they had Senator John Barrasso from Wyoming, and he mentioned there was concern with our senior citizens that this Medicare for all was going to deteriorate the present system.
Yeah, this is the new lie that the Republicans are promoting to try and stop Medicare for all. It's going to hurt all those people over 65 who are on Medicare. No, what's hurting them is Medicare Advantage. Actually, it's cutting. It doesn't hurt them to be on Medicare Advantage, although it does under certain circumstances. But it is draining money out of Medicare because the Medicare Advantage companies get paid both by the people who are buying the Medicare Advantage plans and by the federal government. It's very, very profitable. United Healthcare just showed another, multi-million-dollar profit, for the last quarter. I mean, it's mind-boggling, and they're making all their money on this Medicare Advantage thing. That's what's hurting Medicare.
And the last point I'd like to make on there is I've heard other callers mention that why in the world wouldn't business owners get behind this? I mean, it just seems like it's a no-brainer.
Well, I think for a lot of businesses it is. I remember back 10 years ago or so when Toyota was looking at siting a plant here in the United States, and they had 3 different states fighting, who's going to give them more tax breaks, and they ultimately put it in southern Canada, down near Toronto. And when they were asked why, they said because there's $2,500 worth of health care in every car made in the United States, health insurance expense. And there's only a few $100s of health insurance expense in every car made in Canada, because most of the cost of the Canadian health insurance program, the Medicare for All program that they have in Canada, is not picked up by corporations. It's picked up out of general tax revenues. So yeah, spot on. John, thanks for the call. Well said. We'll be right back. It's 22 minutes and change past the hour. Stick around. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, your media support group for We the People. Welcome back. Jerry in Danville, Virginia. Hey, Jerry, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. It's great to talk to you. I love everything you do, buddy.
Thank you.
The thing I was calling about, I think you may have already answered. I had heard you say about a year or so ago to not go for the health plans that
You're talking Medicare Advantage, the privatized,
yeah, I think that,
privatized
yeah,
Medicare?
You were saying, I'm trying to think of the name of the outfit that tries to get everybody over 50 to get involved.
Yeah, it's AARP. And they
AARP, yeah. And is that? And you were saying don't go. And is that what they try to push on people with Medicare Advantage?
Yeah, AARP makes most of their money selling Medicare Advantage health insurance policies on behalf of United Healthcare. And United Healthcare, which has paid its CEO, Stephen J. Hemsley, over $1 billion and paid their previous CEO, Dollar Bill McGuire, over $1.6 billion. United Healthcare makes their money on Medicare Advantage. And Medicare Advantage is basically a program where you pay the insurance company and the federal government pays the insurance company. They're guaranteed not to lose money. They simply pass their bills through to the federal government. But it's not actually Medicare. It's a privatized program where the health insurance company is guaranteed a profit. So and right now about 1 out of 4 or 1 out of 5 people on Medicare are actually on Medicare Advantage. They've bought into the privatized system. Every single one of those people on Medicare Advantage is helping to rapidly drain the revenues of the Medicare system overall. And this is how the private insurance companies can offer Medicare Advantage programs that look like they're better than regular Medicare. And some of them are. They offer vision, they offer dental, at least in a fairly limited way, or hearing, things like that. The problem is, because it's private health insurance, you're limited to particular, accepted medical practices. So if you're out of your area and you have to get something done, or if you need a specialist that's not in their package, then you get screwed too. But generally speaking, it can be a good deal for people. The problem is that, I simply won't do it, because I don't want to be feeding United Healthcare, and I don't want to be speeding up the demise of Medicare itself. But I'm not going to condemn anybody who does. I'm just saying that's the actual situation. This is part of the Republican plan to privatize Medicare, and they're about 25% of the way there.
And one thing I want to mention to you, I don't know if anybody noticed it last night, but Lanny Davis was on Ari Melber last night, and he was saying that Michael Cohen may not testify on the 7th because of the tweet that Trump put out about his father-in-law.
Because Trump is threatening him.
Got Michael Cohen all shook up.
Yeah, nice little family you got there. Be a shame if anything happened to your father-in-law. I mean, if somebody doesn't think that Trump is a mob boss, just look at that damn tweet. I mean, and by the way, that is obstruction of justice. Threatening a witness intimidation. What else could you call that?
I know, and it would be horrible if he can't testify, because I heard somebody say that it might be as many people as watch a Super Bowl would watch his testimony.
Yeah, I think so. And Trump is going to do everything he can to prevent that from happening. I mean, this is the guy who was inside the whole thing. This is the guy that Trump explicitly told, go lie to Congress. And Michael Cohen apparently has the tape of Trump saying it. And, plus there's emails and other documents, and this is appearing to also involve this whole conspiracy to build a Trump Tower in Moscow during the election. Let's keep in mind what this is all about. This was all about Donald Trump while he was running for president, fully expecting that he wouldn't win, thinking that as soon as the election is over and I'm not the winner, I'll be able to build my 100-story Trump Tower in Moscow. So let's work this thing out with Putin and with Russia. And they were actually doing this while he's running for president. I mean, this is insane. This is treason. We'll be back. It's 27 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's Anything Goes Friday, 28 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, the place where despair is not an option. Our book today is The 31-Day Food Revolution, Heal Your Body, Feel Great, and Transform Your World by Ocean Robbins, with a foreword by Joel Furman, MD. This is from the introduction. Let me call it like it is. We live in a toxic food culture. It's led us to epidemic rates of obesity, heart disease, cancer, type 2 diabetes, and Alzheimer's. Things have gotten so bad that most people think it's normal to have at least a few extra pounds around the middle, to depend on an ever-growing supply of prescription medications, and to lose a little more memory and mobility with every passing year. This may be typical, but it sure as heck doesn't have to be normal. Eating food is mandatory, but suffering from brain fog, living with ever-declining health, and feeling like crap are not. The fact is that right now, hundreds of millions of people are hurting from diseases that never ever needed to happen in the first place. Dangerous changes have been made to our food supply in just the last 25 years that impact how your food is grown and processed and how safe it is to eat. The status quo is driving small farmers out of business, forcing animals to live in deplorable conditions, and producing food that's making us sick. The medical industry and the processed food industry are earning trillions of dollars in a system that's devastating lives and threatening the very future of life on our planet. It's my mission to help put an end to this madness by sharing the truth about food and helping eaters put it into action. That's why I founded the 500,000 plus member Food Revolution Network, and it's why I wrote the book you now hold in your hands. In some ways, I might seem like a pretty unlikely food revolutionary. After all, in 1953, my grandfather, Irving Robbins, joined with his brother-in-law, Bert Baskin, to found the 31 Flavors ice cream company, Baskin-Robbins. In case anyone on the planet missed the memo, we're now pretty clear that ice cream is not a health food. But back in the 1950s, as my grandpa was pumping out delicious flavors by the dozen, not much was known about the connection between food and health. Up until then, most people seemed content with 3 flavors, vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry. My grandfather was a consummate entrepreneur, and he set his heart on offering consumers many more options, 31 to be exact, one for each day of the month. My dad, John, grew up with an ice cream cone-shaped swimming pool. Sometimes he even ate ice cream for breakfast. He was groomed from early childhood to one day run the family company. My dad's youthful innovations included Jamocha Almond Fudge, one of our company's most iconic flavors to this day, and the rollout to all the stores of the famous pink spoons that enabled customers to enjoy free samples. But in 1967, my grandpa's brother-in-law and business partner, Bert Baskin, became very ill. His doctors informed him he was dying of heart disease. I never knew my great-uncle Bert because he passed on a short time later, 6 years before I was born. But I do know that he was one of the greatest entrepreneurs in American history. He had tremendous wealth, a business he enjoyed, and a family he loved. And he ate a lot of ice cream. And in the end, he lost his life and his health at the age of 54. Grandpa Irv was faced with a choice. He could sell the company for a large sum of money, or he could keep the company in the business and take on my dad, then about to turn 20, as a business partner. Grandpa Irv chose to invite his son aboard. But my dad declined his father's invitation, walking away from Baskin-Robbins and from any access to or dependence on the family wealth. For him, it was a choice for integrity, and it's a choice I've always respected. My dad had seen ice cream bring smiles to a lot of people, but he also knew that unhealthy foods could fuel devastating consequences, and he didn't want to spend his life selling a product that might contribute to more people suffering and dying before their time. So he left a path that was practically paved with gold and ice cream to follow his own rocky road. My dad had suffered from polio as a child and grew up frequently fatigued and ill. In the 1960s, he fell in love with my mom in Berkeley, and the two of them set out on a healthy living path. They stopped eating processed foods, they gave up ice cream, and they based their diets on vegetables and whole natural foods. As my dad's health and energy returned, he and my mom moved to a remote little island off the coast of British Columbia, Canada, where they built a one-room log cabin, grew most of their own food, practiced yoga and meditation for several hours a day, and named their kid Ocean. They say that they almost named me Kale. I'm glad they took the more conservative route on this one. In any case, we did eat a lot of kale, along with cabbage, carrots, onions, broccoli, turnips, Swiss chard, and many other vegetables that my parents grew, plus brown rice, sprouts, buckwheat, and beans. For a treat, once in a blue moon, we'd have a few drops of organic blackstrap molasses. I think we went through about a bottle a year. Though my childhood diet was Spartan and my family lived on very little money, I grew up feeling rich in health. I became an accomplished distance runner, completing my first marathon at the age of 10. My dad went on to study the impact of food choices and to share what he was learning. His landmark bestsellers, including Diet for a New America, inspired millions of people and helped to galvanize the modern health food movement. The media was tickled by the notion of a would-be ice cream heir becoming a healthy eating spokesperson and called him the rebel without a cone and the prophet of nonprofit. Tens of thousands of people wrote my dad letters, often by hand, sharing how his work had changed, sometimes even saved their lives. One of the lives his work impacted, as fate would have it, was that of my own Grandpa Irv. Now, my grandpa had been pretty mad when my dad walked away from the ice cream company. He and my dad went years without speaking. But then something remarkable happened. In 1989, Grandpa Irv, then in his early 70s, was suffering from diabetes, heart disease, and weight problems. He'd always eaten the modern diet with a double scoop of ice cream on top. His cardiologist told him he didn't have long to live unless he changed his diet. And then the good doctor handed him a copy of my dad's book, the book 31-Day Food Revolution by Ocean Robbins.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Oh, my goodness. What an amazing day. Andy in Belmont, Michigan, listening on WPRR. Hey, Andy, what's on your mind today? Andy?
Yep.
You are on the air.
Hey, buddy. Hey, just want to give people a little acknowledgement here. For a 40-hour paycheck, I'm paying in $7.50 for my Medicare. And you know how much I'm paying for a month? I'm paying $450 just to have the privilege of paying $5,000 deductible. I would.
You're talking for your regular health insurance.
Yeah. And why not get Medicare for all? If I'm paying $7 for Medicare for when I get older, for like, let's say 65,
right.
For health care for a month or for a week, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, but here's the thing, Andy, excuse me, that $7 that you're paying into Medicare right now, if we went to Medicare for all, that would become probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $200. But that $200 would replace the $450 that you're paying for the $5,000 deductible commercial for-profit medical plan. So, it ends up being cheaper for all of us. It ends up being cheaper for the country. The only people who get hurt, as it were, in quotes, are people like Stephen J. Hemsley, who's already taken $1 billion out of our healthcare system through, by running United Healthcare. Spot on. Andy, well said.
Yep. Have a good one.
Thanks, you too. Stephanie in Hopkins Park, Illinois. Hey, Stephanie, what's up? Thanks for listening to Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Yeah. Where I live at, it's two things. It's on the economic issues. One is a short story. I had two farmers sitting in McDonald's talking, and they were worried because both of them had to plow under their soy fields, so there was nowhere to send them. Granaries were full, and they weren't selling because China's not buying. The one farmer was saying he didn't know what crop to grow next year besides soy. He couldn't grow vegetables because we don't have enough people to pick them. They're being run out the country. He was really in the corner. He was almost in tears.
Wow.
And
where did you see this or hear this?
I was at McDonald's. Usually these farmers meet at a McDonald's, in the morning.
Just somebody you ran into? Okay.
Yeah, and I wasn't talking to them. I was just listening to them talking. They were both upset with Trump for the tariffs, and they were upset about, running all the migrant workers out. Because, I'm in Kankakee County. Kankakee County is, 80% farms. Yeah. And basically, I've been driving. It's 1 in 3 farms are up for sale.
Wow. All over Michigan.
So,
This is like the 80s, when Reagan allowed the giant ag companies to start combining and forming into trusts, and they just wiped out the farmers. You had Willie Nelson doing farm aid out there to help the poor farmers who were ruined by Reagan's policies, and a lot of family farms, a lot of family farmers ended up as sharecroppers, essentially. They had to sell their farm, their home, their land to the big ag companies, and then they were hired by those big ag companies to work their own farms. I mean, and now it's even getting worse. That's amazing, Stephanie.
Secondly, I work in the social service field most of my life, and I have several friends who have had group homes and things like that. Mm-hmm. With the food stamps being cut, a lot of group homes, each kid get their own $100 of food stamps. They've combined it all together to feed the whole house.
Right.
So these people don't know how they're going to feed these children. These people, some of them are disabled. Well, most of them are developmentally disabled or have behavior disorders and can't go home working through DCSF. So they're wondering how are they going to feed these children? And so if they said it's close to 4 million contractors that are not getting paid and probably won't get paid because of this shutdown.
Wow.
So the economy is going to sink so fast before people understand how it got to fall so fast. And my mother just got into a beautiful assisted living, and they're telling her, the same thing, that, without some of the federal funding, she may have to go leave.
Yeah, the SNAP program runs out of money on January 20th. The federal workers will miss their paycheck on January 25th. The federal judiciary runs out of money on January 25th. And on the 28th, the IRS is expected to stop accepting tax filings. Oh, excuse me, to start accepting tax filings. I mean, this is amazing. There's two, Stephanie, real quickly, there's two stories in the Financial Times today that speak to the stuff that you're talking about. One says that, one article, and this is kind of very much under the radar, says that Donald Trump is thinking seriously about eliminating his Chinese tariffs so that they'll start buying soybeans and things again. In other words, the political pressure is getting really intense, and he's just going to kind of pretend he never did it and give China whatever they want. And and the other one is about what the government employees and the contractors, what they're going through, and how the chairman of the New York Fed yesterday in an interview, I believe it was with the Financial Times, said that this is going exactly what you just said. This shutdown is going to show up in the economic numbers fairly soon, and it's going to be fairly drastic.
Well, anyway, I just hope people don't hit the streets, because one young man told me, if my baby has to eat and there's a store down the street that has formula, I'm going to go get it.
Yeah. Well, that's going to be a tough one. It's going to be a real, because that feeds right into the hands of Donald Trump. It's, the Republicans love nothing more than looters. But I get what you're talking about, Stephanie, and I think that, it's tough times, desperate times. Scott in Mission, Kansas. Hey, Scott, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. All right, so I wanted to talk about the 2020 presidential race and how women and people of color seem to have been stepping up and wanting to take that mantle.
Yep.
We just saw Gillibrand, Gabbard, and Warren say they want to run for president. And then there was Julian Castro, first Hispanic man to run.
Yep.
And was there an Asian man before Andrew Yang?
I don't know. I don't think so.
All right. But, to me, I see like a relationship between that and how our culture has been evolving to include more people of color in leading roles.
Agreed.
And women. And, if you look at superhero movies, how many female-led superhero movies can you think of?
Well, it's exploding now. I mean, it's...
Yes.
So, and superheroes who are people of color as well, men or women.
Yeah.
I agree, Scott. I think that I think it's a really good and healthy thing. If you go back and you look at that rat study that we were reporting on a couple of weeks ago here on this program, that black rats and white rats, these lab rats, when the black rats or the white rats, pick your side, were exclusively raised with their own kind, they tended not to save the other kind when they were in trouble, when they were drowning. But when they were raised in mixed groups where there were both black and white rat pups, all nursing off rat mom, and they grew up together, then they would save rats regardless of their race or their color, their fur color. And I think it's true with human beings. I think that we're mammals, we're not immune to these things, and the more that we see in our media and in our schools and in our institutions and the cop on the beat and everything else, the more that we see the diversity that is our society, that is our culture, that is the fundamental strength of America, the more accepting of diversity we become, particularly the older white people, who grew up in a highly segregated society and therefore are carrying some of those old white rat things, So yeah, I think it's a big deal. And
it's pretty white.
I'm sorry?
So it's pretty white here in Kansas. So.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it is in a lot of parts of the United States, but spot on. But I really think that this is the solution to the whole thing is to have something like that going on. Thanks a lot for the call. I appreciate it. Wow, my call screen software just crashed. In fact, both of them just crashed. Sure, we got to bail out of all this stuff. I'm going to try and open Assistant Producer. I don't know what's going on with this. But it ain't working. Anyhow, impeachment has always been the right remedy. Let's talk about this. Now it may become politically plausible. This is sure you're going to have to reboot everything. I think it's just died. Anyhow, impeachment has always been the right remedy. Now it may become politically plausible. This is Carrie Elveld. If you're on hold, by the way, your call is probably going to get dumped. Just call right back. My apologies. Donald Trump has already committed an impeachable offense. Carrie Elveld is writing for the Daily Kos, according to federal prosecutors in the Southern District of New York. And now this is not the Mueller investigation. This is not Robert Mueller. Donald Trump has already committed an impeachable offense. This is according to federal prosecutors in the Southern District of New York. In a December sentencing filing against Michael Cohen, they said that Cohen made 2 hush money payments to women, basically Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels, to suppress the stories and, quote, thereby preventing them from influencing the 2016 election. That's a crime. It's not only a crime, it's also how Trump essentially lied his way into the White House. Which means that the election itself didn't have integrity. The election itself was illegitimate. And now we get this report, overnight that Michael Cohen was directed by Donald Trump to lie to Congress. And that it's not just Cohen's testimony, that there's documentary evidence of this. At multiple sources of documentary evidence that are in the possession of Mueller. If this is true, there's 2 impeachable offenses that we know about. 2 that we could use to go after Donald Trump, to impeach Donald Trump. It seems to me like maybe a good idea to be talking about this and thinking about it. By the way, our call screen software is back up. Give us a call at 202-808-9925, and we can continue with Anything Goes Friday. This is Lindsey Graham explained the overlapping parallels. He says Nixon cheated. He cheated the electoral system by concealing efforts of a political break-in, and his people thought the other side deserved to be cheated. They thought his enemies deserved to be mistreated. Ladies and gentlemen, they were wrong. Today, Republicans with a small handful of Democrats will vote to impeach President Clinton. Oh, this is Lindsey Graham back in the 90s when he thought that if a president lies, he should be impeached. That Lindsey Graham.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's 45 minutes past the hour. It's Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be back as our calls start coming in. We'll be back with your calls right after this. So once again, this is a 1998 speech on the floor of the Senate by Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. Nixon cheated. He cheated the electoral system by concealing efforts of a political break-in, and his people thought the other side deserved to be cheated. They thought his enemies deserved to be mistreated. Ladies and gentlemen, they are wrong. Today, we will vote to impeach a president. Why? Because we believe he committed crimes resulting in cheating our legal system. We believe he lied under oath numerous times, that he tampered with evidence, that he conspired to present false testimony to a court of law. We believe he assaulted our legal system in every way. Lindsey Graham, speaking of Bill Clinton. Amazing. So, where do we go with this? Jan in Seattle. Hey, Jan, thanks for watching us on YouTube. What's up?
Hi, I'm just swallowing a bite of food.
That's, it's kind of the waiter's disease, right? As soon as you put food in your mouth, the waiter comes up and says, how's everything? Murphy's Law. So what's up, Jan?
So I was listening to The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell, which I record every day.
Mm-hmm.
And he worked for Daniel Moynihan for 10 years or so in the Senate. And he said, every senator has a secret hiding place.
Yeah, I've been in one of them actually with Sherrod Brown. It's down underneath the Capitol. There's these old cells that I think used to be slave cells or something.
Or it's wherever. I'm thinking McConnell's is probably in Trump Tower, but it's someplace where nobody else knows where it is unless the senator invites that person there.
Right.
So that's why people can't find Mitch McConnell. He's hiding out in his little cubby hole somewhere.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense.
Well, and may I just say something about Michael Cohen?
Mm-hmm.
I am very concerned for his safety. I hope he is squirreled away someplace safe, because Donald Trump is threatening him. You're absolutely right. You know, what he said, what Trump said tweeted about Cohen's father-in-law.
Yeah. Well, and look at what happened to this young Russian woman, or Belarusian woman who was in Thailand, doing these sex seminars or whatever. And she said that she had audio and video of Deripaska, the guy that the Republicans in the Senate, that Mitt Romney and Lindsey Graham just voted to lift the sanctions on, Mitch McConnell. She has video and audio of him talking with the Russian number 2 guy, the vice minister or whatever, and talking with 3 Americans who were speaking in English with him about the U.S. elections. So she had 10 hours of this stuff. And once when the news came out, she says she gave it all back to Deripaska. But I mean, and then she tries to fly home to Belarus, and the plane stops in Moscow to change planes, and boom, she gets arrested. I don't think this woman's ever going to see the light of day. In fact, I'm not sure that she'll survive. You don't take on Russian oligarchs like that with real evidence that might take them down without risking your life.
Exactly. Look, just remember back what all the people surrounding Reagan who just, disappeared somewhere, had a...
Yeah. That's the last chapter of Barbara Honegger's book, October Surprise. It lists all the people who mysteriously died in the Reagan administration when the news started to come out about the October Surprise, starting with Bill Casey, his campaign manager. It's an amazing story. Yeah, so Trump is part of the Russian oligarchy. Be very afraid. You're right, Jan. Thank you for the call. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Maine and Chicago, listening on Chicago's Progressive Talk. Hey, Maine, what's up?
Hey, how you doing, Tom?
Good.
Yeah, I was just wanted to make, some comments here. They said that the Constitution is supposed to be like a living document that's supposed to change as the people change.
That's what Jefferson said.
For the better.
Yeah.
Yeah, then for the worse. And that this democracy is supposed to check capitalism and keeping it from becoming a fascist regime, like it's turned into, And so, and in order to do that, I feel, because they wrote it then in the beginning, and now that we've had these 200-300 years advancement, there should be some changes that should be made at like certain issues, like free education and health care, and pay student athletes and pay the people to go back to school. These should be issues of democracy that we need to solidify in a foundation of these issues of the people, and this is democracy. And this here will make people over mammon instead of mammon over people.
Amen. Amen. And yes, and we need a return to democracy. I mean, that's the bottom line. Maine, thank you. Very well said. Erwin in Missoula, Montana. Hey, Erwin, what's up?
Yes, Tom, I want to talk a little bit about narcissism in presidencies. About 5 years ago, Emory University did a study. This was before Trump and before Barack Obama was rated, and they rated Lyndon B. Johnson as a top as far as being narcissist, being grandiose narcissist, and right after him was Teddy Roosevelt. In fact, both Roosevelts were in the top 10, as was Nixon.
Yeah, that was that measurement of brazenness that I was talking about last week. That is generally regarded as it can be a characteristic of sociopaths. It's also a characteristic of great leaders. It's what Churchill had. It's what Stalin had, for that matter. Terrible leaders as well. Hitler. And the problem is, if you combine brazenness with a high moral core, as you did with Franklin Roosevelt and to some extent Lyndon Johnson or Jack Kennedy, then you have great leadership. If you combine brazenness with a vacuous, with no moral core, then what you have is a tyrant, basically.
Right. Yeah, and this study also did both what was called it was actually introverted type narcissism too, and
Right.
the disorder itself. And you know, interesting enough, like Jimmy Carter and George Washington were right in the middle, and Abraham Lincoln and Jefferson were down the scale. So it's interesting to look at.
It absolutely is, Erwin. It absolutely is. Thanks a lot for the call, and thanks for listening to us on Progressive Voices. Sharon in Sandstone, Minnesota. Hey, Sharon, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. It's Karen.
Oh, Karen, I'm sorry.
That's all right. The reason I'm calling today is I know there's been this debate over whether a president can be indicted or not, but on one of the talk shows, I don't recall who, someone who was a constitutional person said if the founding fathers, who were so concerned about some tyrant, becoming a leader in the United States, didn't want someone to be indicted, they would have put it in the Constitution.
Yeah, I agree. And there's nothing in the Constitution that says that the president can't be indicted. And although it does provide for impeachment, that doesn't mean that indictment is not available. And 100% of the opinions saying that the president can't be indicted came out of White Houses, out of Justice Departments attached to White Houses that were looking at the possibility of indictment. Specifically, Nixon, Reagan, the elder Bush, and Clinton. Those are the Justice Departments that have issued memos saying we don't think that it's appropriate to indict a president. Well, they were all serving presidents who had committed crimes, and very straightforward stuff. So yeah, I'm with you, Sharon. Go ahead.
I know when Trump was first elected, I got a Republican friend said, "What do you think of this guy?" And I said, "I think he's going out in handcuffs. At least that's what I hope for."
Yeah, I agree. Sharon, thank you. Scott in Alameda, California. Hey, Scott, what's up?
Hey, well, first on the Constitution, everybody should keep this in their head when they think of this original intent. The Constitution is not a suicide pact. Okay?
Amen.
The other thing is, Donald Trump didn't originally threaten Cohen's father-in-law in a tweet. He did it on Jeanine Pirro's show live on television.
Right, that was the first time. That was like a week ago.
He didn't know the man's name. Jeanine Pirro specifically asked him for the man's name on television. I think that's a crime.
That's like, let me help you intimidate a witness.
Exactly. And they want the power of television, but they don't want any of the responsibility.
Yeah.
And one other thing on Bill Barr, you have to remember Bill Barr was involved when he did these pardons. He also wiped out any ability to get at the drug connection.
Right. He shut down the entire investigation. Bill Barr shut down the entire investigation of Iran-Contra by pardoning Casper Weinberger and 5 other people. And the prosecutor at the time, he was called an independent counsel, Lawrence Walsh, in the headline on the New York Times, December 25th, 1992, said, the prosecutor calls it a cover-up. It was a cover-up. It was very simple.
I would urge everyone to search out CIA director plus South Central on YouTube, and you'll see Director Deutsch being confronted by the citizens of South Central Los Angeles after this Inspector General report came out that verified a lot of what Gary Webb had in his groundbreaking series called Dark Alliance.
Right.
It was San Jose Mercury News.
Yep.
That was
I remember it well. Yeah. That was a very, very strange time in American history, the whole Iran-Contra thing. And Bill Barr, the guy who Trump wants to be Attorney General, he's the guy who put an end to all of it. Scott, thank you for the call. We'll be back. It's Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Stick around. We'll be right back with more of your calls and the news of the day.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
You know, here at the Thom Hartmann Program, we're creating basically 3 programs identically at the same time. We've got the normal commercial program. We have our television program that is carried by Free Speech TV, and we do fundraisers for Free Speech TV, and a small amount of that money comes back to us, which helps us provide that show to Free Speech TV. So that stream has its own revenue stream in it. And then we also provide a nonprofit radio show with no commercials in it that's completely nonprofit compliant to our Pacifica affiliates, to the stations all over the country, nonprofit stations. We pay for that one because we don't charge them by your support at Patreon. And in exchange for that, over on Patreon, you can get the full 3-hour show, archives of the show, and special clips like this amazing clip that we're just now putting up about 6 ways America is becoming a third world country. Check it out, patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope this clip was useful to you, and thanks so much for supporting our program. We're reading today from a book by Four Arrows, also known as Donald Jacobs or Don Jacobs. It's titled Point of Departure, Returning to Our More Authentic Worldview for Education and Survival. This is from Chapter 3, Community-Oriented Self-Authorship. Knowing the power of intentional and unintentional trance-based learning and how the latter can make us susceptible to believing untoward communication from authority figures, we can understand one reason self-authorship is important in the indigenous worldview. When we are in control of our thinking and trust our intuitive insights, our natural trance awareness helps prevent misdirection from external influences. It gives us the authority for what we can then instill in our minds to achieve. If someone such as a trusted shaman or psychologist has, certain skills at hypnosis, we might tentatively authorize him or her to help us form the most effective images, but we do so with full awareness. More important than avoiding negative influence from perceived authority figures, however, is the self-authorship via indigenous worldview that gives high degrees of individual autonomy to people while at the same time assuring that people use their freedoms to help their communities. In the indigenous worldview, the highest authority for all decisions comes from one's personal, honest reflection on lived experience with the understanding that everything is related. It is this understanding that makes a distinction between self-authorship, as it is generally perceived in the dominant worldview, and that of the indigenous one. Self-authorship is always ultimately in the service of the greater good in the latter. Self-authorship in indigenous ways of thinking comes from knowing that the highest experience for decisions comes from honest reflection on lived experience in light of realizing that everything is related in life, and this interconnectedness must be a part of all decisions. Michael Anthony Hart gets to these ideas about inner authority coming from such reflection. Through inward exploration, tapping into creative forces that run through all life, individuals come to subjectively experience a sense of wholeness. This exploration is an experience in context, where the context is the self in connection with happenings, and the findings from such experience is knowledge. Happenings may be facilitated through rituals or ceremonies that incorporate dreaming, visioning, meditation, and prayer. The findings from such experiences are encoded in community praxis as a way of synthesizing knowledge derived from introspection. Hence, indigenous peoples' cultures recognize and affirm the spiritual through practical applications of inner space, excuse me. Such a holistic understanding of accessing, trusting, and exercising our inner authority is the source of the creativity and knowledge synthesis we need for addressing our global problems. While Ehrman refers to this inner authority with the Cree term mamatawisin, which is the capacity to tap the creative life forces of the inner space by the use of all the faculties that consume our being, it is to exercise inwardness. This understanding is missing from our dominant worldview, where objective-based outward exploration is sought for guidance rather than introspective knowledge development. Dependence on external authority is the rule in spite of the call to question authority that has always resonated on the fringes. Under the dominant worldview, obedience trumps community-oriented self-authorship. Decision-making is rarely a holistic process, nor does it utilize alternative states of awareness, deep reflection, and community praxis. The random quotations below, selected from an internet search, reveal that obedience to authority is common under the dominant worldview.
Obedience to lawful authority is the foundation of manly characteristics by Robert E. Lee. All religions have morality on obedience, have based morality on obedience, Alexander Herzen. Obedience brings peace in decision-making, James Faust. Justice is the insurance that we have on our lives and property. Obedience is the premium we pay for it, William Penn. I was not born to be free. I was born to adore and obey, C.S. Lewis. Every game has rules. Life's a game that has its respective rules. Obey the rules, win the game, Israel Ahavor. A wolf cannot have more than one head or it tears itself apart, Con Iggulden. From a social dissident on the fringe, Noam Chomsky wrote, any dictator would admire the uniformity and obedience of the U.S. media. From an indigenous-raised Lakota, Oyessa, the American Indian was an individualist in religion as in war. Reliance on external authority is not only the bedrock of choices in mainstream society and the main approach to moral development, but it also gives guides jurisprudence and conflict resolution. Authorized punishment or revenge is a primary goal for wrongdoing. Under indigenous worldview, bringing offenders back into community via affected members of the community is the goal. This relational approach expands the circle of land and seeks input from the wide circle of relevant people. Spiritual resources are employed via prayer or song, and subjectivity is as important as objectivity. Hart emphasizes this relationship as emphasizing spirit and spirituality, and in turn, a sense of communitism and respectful individualism. And then he goes on about the indigenous worldview and how it relates to what we would call communism. Point of departure by Four Arrows.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Over at the Maddow blog, Rachel Maddow's producer, Steve Bannon, is reporting that White House aides who did not want to speak on the record because they didn't want to get fired or have Donald Trump threaten their in-laws, White House aides have said that Mick Mulvaney and some other officials in the White House and Donald Trump were upset when Nancy Pelosi said that she represents a co-equal branch, that Congress has co-equal powers with the president. And they wanted to, quote, put her in her place, which is why they blew up her trip to Afghanistan. Trump says it was a 7-day trip for PR. No, it was a 3-day trip, and there was supposed to be no information about it that was released at all until after they were all safely back home. Trump said that it was all military aircraft. When he first told her, or when they first notified her that they were going to pull the plug on the military aircraft, they went to Plan B, which was civilian aircraft, commercial aircraft, and Trump outed that. And at that point, the generals in Afghanistan said, we can't guarantee your safety anymore. The president has outed your trip. So here we have literally inside the White House, these men inside the White House saying it's time to put this woman, Nancy Pelosi, in her place. Their phrase, not mine. This is absolutely bizarre. I mean, bizarre. Jeff Merkley reporting that he's got the memo, actually. A person in the DHS has leaked, or whatever the word is, whistleblown to Senator Merkley this internal memo that shows that Kirstjen Nielsen and Donald Trump and everybody, and John Kelly, everybody in the administration was lying through their teeth when they said, it's not our plan or our policy to separate families at the border. They actually laid this out in a policy memo a year ago, more than a year ago, December of 2017, 2 years ago. They laid it out in a memo, number one. Number two, they said that they were doing it for deterrence. Now, Kirstjen Nielsen has testified under oath before Congress and also in the media saying, no, those are lies. We didn't do it for deterrence. That's despicable. Yes, it is despicable, but the memo says that's why you're doing it. Punish the children.
is the essence of this memo. And Jeff Merkley, he says this proves that the Trump administration, I'm quoting Jeff Merkley, deliberately created the family humanitarian crisis at the border, specifically targeting children as pawns. He says, what we've long suspected is now clear for the world to see. The Trump administration is purposely choosing to inflict harm on children in a misguided attempt to deter refugees from coming to America. Their plan was fully scripted, arresting family members who seek to sponsor the kids, jailing children indefinitely in violation of current court orders. It was their intention to cause as much damage as possible all along, writes Senator Merkley. He adds, these are not our American values. No, these are thug values. This is like, you know, a mafia boss saying, hey, nice little family you got there. Be a shame if anything happened to your father-in-law, which is what Donald Trump tweeted this morning to Michael Cohen. We have a mob boss in the White House. And a grifter. And his whole family are grifters. I mean, now Ivanka Trump is coming out, you know, now that it's been released that Donald Trump, during the election, running for president of the United States, was continuing his negotiations with Russia to build a Trump Tower in Moscow, a 100-story Trump Tower in Moscow. If this is the thing that is causing him to kowtow to Putin and to Russia and basically every other dictator in the world. Now, he's got a Trump Tower in the Philippines. He loves Duterte. He's got a Trump Tower in Turkey. He loves Erdogan. If this is all it is, he just wants to make more millions of dollars? That's the worst kind of treason. Selling your country out for money? This is mind-boggling. So it comes out that not only was Donald Trump continuing to negotiate this, at the same time he was debating Hillary Clinton and she was saying, you're a puppet of Putin, and he was saying, no, you're the puppet, you're the puppet. At that same time, after the debate, he goes and gets on the phone and calls up, you know, whoever in Russia and says, okay, how's it going? Or Cohen does. And Cohen is reporting on this, on his activities with these Russian oligarchs to help build this Trump Tower in Moscow. During the presidential campaign, he's reporting on this, not just to Trump, but to Ivanka and Trump Jr. So Ivanka comes out with this very carefully worded denial. She says, her spokesperson says, Ms. Trump did not know about this proposal until after a non-binding letter of intent had been signed. Never talked to anyone outside the organization about the proposal. Oh, wait a minute. You mean you talk to people inside the Trump organization, like your dad and Don Jr. and Cohen? Never talked to anyone outside the organization about the proposal. Never visited Russia, right, the project site, and was only minimally involved, just like the getaway driver in a bank rob. I was in the street out in front. I wasn't there robbing that bank. Me? Let's not forget, this is the guy who was convicted of fraud and had to pay $25 million for running a phony university and ripping off thousands of Americans. Just think for a minute, if Obama had been convicted of fraud and had to pay a $25 million fine for ripping off American students. He made it his private business practice to stiff his creditors. I mean, there's just no shortage of stories about this. He brags about, sexually attacking women, grabbing them by the crotch. He brags about it. He made up stories. He lied about seeing Muslim Americans on TV cheering the destruction of the World Trade Center. And lied repeatedly, continues to lie about it to this day. He mocked the disabled people, specifically a New York Times reporter. He brags that he doesn't read books because, well, who has the time? That's the verbatim quote from him. He still thinks the Central Park Five should get the death penalty, even though they didn't commit any crime at all. He tells his supporters to beat up protesters. In one rally, he said, take the guy's coat before you throw him out in the cold. He's had this parade of neo-Nazis and white supremacists while he's refusing to condemn Nazis. He's firing scientists throughout the government. There's a great summary of this, by the way, by Babylon's Sister over on Democratic Underground, but it's from January 11th, so it's maybe a little hard to find. He's been overcharging the Secret Service. I mean, he's renting them offices in Trump Tower, and when he was confronted about it, he says, no, that's smart business. It's amazing. I mean, what this guy is doing. And we look at Trump supporters and go, how can you support this guy? Oh, yeah, he's just fine. Oh, Obama was terrible. And you wonder why so many Americans look at Trump supporters and think these people are stupid. Now, some of them probably are stupid. The rest of them, though, are the victims of lies and misinformation that are spewing daily out of billionaire oligarch Rupert Murdoch's television network, Fox, and on right-wing hate radio all over the country. That's what's going on. Dave in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how you doing? I got just a quick one here for you, and you can expand on it. I know there's the Great Wall of China, but do other countries have walls that I'm not aware of? I didn't know that there were walls. I thought I saw a blurb on MSNBC or something where there's 50-some countries with walls, or is that
yeah,
a mistaken...
Trump put this talking point out a couple days ago, and it turns out he exaggerated it, but yes, there are. Actually, most of them are fences. Before the European Union was formed, most countries had borders, or at least, some semblance of borders in high traffic areas. And then a lot of those fences got torn down after the EU was put together. And now, after this immigrant crisis, in quotes, a lot of these countries are putting their borders back in place. So that's what's going on.
The actual walls.
Yeah, they're not like Great Wall of China walls, which, by the way, is 1,000 years old.
Well, it's like when you go to Canada, you go through the Sioux, or you could go through the woods, I guess, if you didn't get lost.
Yeah.
But
well, that's what happens. But this is just they're just throwing chum in the water. This is just
my buddies hear this stuff and it drives me nuts. There's walls all over. I says, well, there are.
Yeah. Well, there are, but not like Trump is talking about. Not even close. Dave, thanks for the call. I mean, that's East Berlin, right? And that's gone.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
16 minutes past the hour. It's Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Welcome back. Jackie in Port Angeles, Washington. Hey, Jackie, what's on your mind today?
I'm in Port Townsend.
Oh, Port Townsend, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I think we need to be contemplating and discussing what we're going to do when we find out that there are senators and representatives who are guilty of aiding and abetting treason and other crimes.
Right.
And what we're going to do when it's determined that the whole election and every action that the current administration has taken is illegitimate.
That's a damn good question, Jackie. And, you've got these Republican senators who voted to end or reduce the sanctions on this Russian oligarch who apparently now has, his agents or whatever, his friends have control of this woman from Thailand. I mean, it's pretty mind-boggling. And, yeah, we do need to have that conversation. Yeah. Where do you think we should start it?
Well, right here on this show.
Okay. Well, we've been doing that for some time. I mean, it is so obvious to me that this man in the White House has not only committed treason on repeated instances, but is continuing to operate against the interests of the United States and continuing to flaunt the Constitution. And the oath of office he took, and he keeps in his emails to Fred Flintstone, he keeps asserting that he took an oath to protect the people of the United States. No, he never took that oath. He took an oath to protect the Constitution of the United States. And that he has been essentially spitting on. And now we have evidence of at least two major crimes, suborning perjury before Congress and fraudulently becoming elected president by preventing the news from coming out that he had these two affairs. This stuff these are clear crimes. These are much bigger crimes than Bill Clinton having sex with Monica Lewinsky. This is huge stuff. And the fact that impeachment hasn't even started yet is pretty shocking to me. Jackie, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. I'm with you. Norma in Montgomery. Hey, Norma, what's up?
Well, Jackie just stole part of my thunder, but I want to know what are our rules and what kind of laws can we use to remove Mitch McConnell, because he is, in my opinion, committing treason. And we have these other senators, the 11 of them, who went to Russia last year for July the 4th. Mm-hmm. And a couple weeks ago, you were talking about a coup. This has obviously been a coup, and it's probably gone back to the Powell memo. But how can the Senate remove Mitch McConnell and vacate his seat so that we can get a vote and get the government open?
Well, there's two ways. One is through impeachment, which would have to start in the House of Representatives. The other is that the Senate rules provide that a member can suffer a whole series of different consequences if they're found guilty of certain crimes against the Senate itself. And I would say Mitch McConnell, starting with withholding the nomination of Merrick Garland, has more than qualified for this. And those can range all the way from censure to removal from office. The Senate, for example, in the case of, I think his name was William Cooper, the copper baron from Montana back in the 1890s, who paid $1,000 each to people to other senators, or excuse me, to members of the Oklahoma Senate or Montana Senate to put him in the United States Senate. The Senate refused to seat him. So they have the power to do that, but it's going to take a significant majority of senators to make that happen. And so far, I'm not seeing any Republicans breaking ranks when it comes to Mitch McConnell. They're all terrified of him. Norma, thank you for the call. It's an important issue. We'll be right back. Hey, if you're one of our Patreon sponsors or YouTube sponsors, be sure to check out the new video that's available talking about our poopy president. No, I don't mean that in a bizarre or even sarcastic way. It turns out that the number of people who are now hospitalized, many of them are going to need kidney transplants all around the United States. I mean, literally, their lives have been devastated and wiped out, is the result of a decision that Donald Trump made to tell his EPA to allow more cow poop, basically, to be intentionally or unintentionally used for irrigation of crops, specifically romaine lettuce. And thus, you are getting poisoned because he wants deregulation. Isn't that cool? Check out the video. It's coming up for all of our Patreon and YouTube sponsors. And thanks so much for supporting the program.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
For supporting Welcome back. Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Matt in Napa, California. Hey, Matt, what's up?
Hey, Tom. So I hate to get philosophical. Try not to do that, but just
it's Friday.
Okay, good. I know you're usually into that kind of thing. So the kind of the fundamentals of progressive thought, I know it's hard to completely define, but it seems like we go for something along the lines that, individuals are products of their environment to some degree, and we can identify certain populations that have obviously been, put into circumstances where they've suffered repression, and as a result of that, their coping mechanisms to get along in the real society have been, damaged to some degree.
All right.
And I'm just wondering if that's so that implies some degree of tolerance to the circumstances of individuals, and I think, racists and some of those people have also, they've grown up in an environment that's not conducive to becoming a fully actualized human being. And
right.
I'm not saying we need to be compassionate necessarily. There's some odd dividing line between how do we work against what the people are standing for and not hating those people.
I think we're already there, Matt. You are not seeing left-wingers going out murdering right-wing whack jobs. Instead, you're seeing right-wing whack jobs, with startling regularity, murdering progressives, people of color, Jews. I mean, pick your minority group. And to the point now that more Americans have been murdered. If you take 9/11 out of the equation, more Americans have been murdered by right-wing hate mongers in the last 30, 40 years than by any other group, by Muslims or anybody else. So, you know, I don't think we're sacrificing our progressive values to combat Trump. I think we're still holding to them. Nobody is calling for violence against, you know, right-wingers.
Okay, well, but how about the southern states? I mean, the Deep South, you look at what's going on there and the poverty. I mean, they basically have just collapsed since the
Yeah, that's a violence
war.
that the libertarians have inflicted on the citizens of those states.
Well, it seems like there's a kind of a national dialogue that castigates them in a rather poor light, and a non-sympathetic one for the most part from what I'm seeing.
Yeah, but that's, you know, ridiculing people for going all Duck Dynasty is a different thing than, you know, harming them, than specifically harming them, or calling for them to be harmed, which is what's happening on the right. I'm not so concerned about that, Matt. But I get your point, but I'm not so concerned about it. And I think that we are holding to our values. Matt, thanks a lot for calling. Thanks for listening to AM 910 in San Francisco. Rich in Indiana. Hey, Rich, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Just remember that Duck Dynasty was a total put-up job. Those guys are nothing like they appear.
Yeah, they used to run an ad agency, and they all looked all Brooks Brothers.
Exactly. I'm hoping that what I'm going to offer are not rhetorical questions, that there is an answer. I want to know, you are there for the vocab, and you give us traction for ideas. And when you told me about the Code of Federal Regulation back in November, the CFR, I got busy and started trying to dig down and discover. And there's this daily version that they call the Federal Register. Mm-hmm. And then when that got discussed on CNN, I was able to say, oh, the annual Code of Federal Regulation.
Right.
My question, where is refusal of an illegal order as something that is okay? I'm remembering from the My Lai Massacre, 16 March 1968, and that comes around because there's this term to suborn perjury, which is getting described as an instruction to a witness to lie to a prosecutor. How do you get at the Code of Federal Regulation and, you know, what is U.S. Code and / section for refuse an illegal order?
I think for that, Rich, you'd have to look at the UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice. There is a parallel legal system that we have in the United States, which does not include, by the way, the Bill of Rights. And that is for people who are enlisted in the military. Or commissioned into the military. People who are in the military don't have a First Amendment right of free speech. They don't have a Fourth Amendment right of privacy. They basically don't have those rights. And the Uniform Code of Military Justice is what everybody in the military lives and dies under. It replaces the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations. So if there is a provision that says that you can refuse to do an illegal order, that's probably where you'd find it.
Classification of criminal activity to conceal.
I'm sorry, I can't quite hear you, Rich.
Classification of criminal activity to conceal it?
It might be. I'm not real sure. The specific laws there, I just don't know. Rich, thanks a lot for the call. Good luck digging it out. Report back to us. 28 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's the program where we ask, is Walmart a person? And we say, no, not a chance. Come on, give me a break. We'll be back with Anything Goes Friday right after this. For our book club today, we're reading from a book by Elizabeth Holtzman, one of the former U.S. congresswomen who sat on the committee that considered impeaching Richard Nixon. And this book is titled The Case for Impeaching Trump. Just came out. This is from the first chapter titled Impeachment. When Donald Trump's presidential election victory was announced in the early morning hours of November 9, 2016, like many Americans, I rubbed my eyes in disbelief and dismay. Two questions raced through my mind. What had become of America that a man so unfit, so small-minded, so mean-spirited could be elected. A man whose ethnic and racial bigotry had set the stage for his presidential run when he called Mexicans rapists and made racist birther attacks on President Barack Obama, whose vulgarity and misogyny were laid bare in the Access Hollywood tape when he bragged about forcibly grabbing women by their genitals, whose performance at presidential debates showed him not only flagrantly ill-informed, but manifestly unwilling to get informed. My second question was about how much harm this man would do to America as its 45th president. I have my answer now to the latter, less than 2 years after the election. President Trump has damaged American democracy far more than I would have guessed. He has refused to protect our system of free elections from foreign interference. He has relentlessly attacked the administration of justice, in particular the investigation into a possible conspiracy with Russia regarding the 2016 presidential election, putting himself above the rule of law. He has failed to separate his personal business from the country's, flaunting the Constitution's requirements. And he has violated the constitutional rights of the people in separating children from parents at the southwest border without due process of law. And to cover up these misdeeds, he has systematically lied to and assailed the press. These are great and dangerous offenses that the framers of our Constitution wanted to counteract and thwart. They provided a powerful remedy: impeachment. Many tremble at the word, fearing how President Trump's supporters will react to an impeachment inquiry, worrying that it will only further polarize an already deeply divided nation, or that there will not be enough votes in the Senate to convict him if the House of Representatives votes to impeach. Just calling for an inquiry will be viewed as a Democratic Party attack on the head of another party, a kind of coup d'etat. It's easy to find reasons to be anxious, but I'm not afraid. As a junior congresswoman, the youngest ever elected at that time, I served on the House Judiciary Committee that voted to impeach President Richard Nixon for the high crimes and misdemeanors he committed in connection with the Watergate cover-up and other matters. Through thorough, fair, and above all bipartisan, the committee acted on solid evidence presented in televised hearings that riveted the nation, handing us the blueprint for how impeachment can be successfully pursued today. In our 225 years of constitutional democracy, the Nixon impeachment process has been proven to be the only presidential effort that worked. Though Nixon resigned, the only president ever to do so, 2 weeks after the committee's impeachment vote, he did so to avoid the certainty of being impeached and removed from office. We became a better nation for having held the president accountable. All of which raises two further questions. Should we be considering the impeachment of President Donald J. Trump? Will we again become a better nation by pursuing that option? To answer, we need to set aside President Trump's unremitting attacks on the environment, on our close allies, on the Affordable Care Act, and any disagreements we have over policy, as well as any personal animus, and simply ascertain whether he is engaged in the kind of egregious conduct that would meet the constitutional standards for impeachment and removal from office. This means we have to focus sharply on his potentially impeachable offenses. In doing so, we will find it useful to compare them, when possible, to similar offenses by President Nixon, found to be impeachable by the House Judiciary Committee in 1974. Here's a list of some of President Trump's potentially impeachable offenses developed as of this writing. A possible interference with or obstruction of the administration of justice and an abuse of power. On May 9, 2017, Trump fired FBI Director James Comey, who was investigating both his national security advisor, Michael Flynn, and Russia's connections to the Trump campaign in connection with influencing the 2016 presidential election. 2 days later, President Trump admitted to NBC's Lester Holt that Comey's firing had to do with that, quote, Russia thing. In other words, President Trump acknowledged that he was trying to shut down the FBI investigation into his own possible conspiracy with Russia. Flynn has since pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI. The Comey firing uncannily echoes Nixon's firing of the special Watergate prosecutor for seeking highly damaging information about that president, a brazen defiance of the rule of law that triggered the start of impeachment proceedings against Nixon. A second possible interference with or obstruction of the administration of justice and an abuse of power. President Trump has persistently and publicly attacked those heading the Russia investigation, including Special Counsel Robert S. Mueller III and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, and has repeatedly condemned Attorney General Jeff Sessions for recusing himself suggesting that he wants to fire any and all of them in order to get control of the Russian investigation. He actually did give an order to fire Mueller. A failure to care that the laws are faithfully executed is required by the Constitution. To try to deflect public concern about his possible role, well, it continues from there. The Case for Impeaching Trump by Elizabeth Holtzman. You know, here at the Thom Hartmann Program, we're creating basically 3 programs identically at the same time. We've got the normal commercial program. We have our television program that is carried by Free Speech TV, and we do fundraisers for Free Speech TV, and a small amount of that money comes back to us, which helps us provide that show to Free Speech TV. So that stream has its own revenue stream in it. And then we also provide a nonprofit radio show with no commercials in it that's completely nonprofit compliant to our Pacifica affiliates, to the stations all over the country, nonprofit stations. We pay for that one because we don't charge them by your support at Patreon. And in exchange for that, over on Patreon, you can get the full 3-hour show, archives of the show, and special clips like this amazing clip that we're just now putting up about 6 ways America is becoming a third world country. Check it out, patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope this clip was useful to you, and thanks so much for supporting our program.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
For supporting our program. Welcome back. Ted Lieu tweeting, as a former prosecutor, I can tell you how a target responds to allegations is something we watch closely. Does Donald Trump deny the BuzzFeed story alleging he told Congress to lie to Congress? Or he told Cohen to lie to Congress, which is a felony, by the way. Ted Lieu, the former prosecutor, now member of the House of Representatives, says no. Instead, he threatens Cohen, which could also be a felony. Yeah, dig your hole deeper, Mr. Trump. Kenyatta in Redlands, California. Hey, Kenyatta, what's on your mind today?
Well, I'm still saving my pennies, hoping to join you and Louise in Alaska this summer. So.
It's going to take a lot of pennies. Next year, we're going to try and do something a whole lot cheaper. Yeah.
Well, you know, before I leave this planet, I'm going to shake your hand, sir. Yeah. Listen, I wanted to tell you that a couple of weeks ago, last time we spoke, I talked to you about Donald Trump. You were talking about brazenness, and I commented that he was also a coward. And obviously we have a limited amount of time for me to make my comment, and I wasn't able to delve further into that. But you did that for me today on your show when you said that he, by these nefarious dealings, was selling out our country or selling out the country.
Yep.
That's what cowards do. They run. They don't fight. Whether it be his 5 deferments in Vietnam, that's what he does. He puts everybody else out there. He lets everybody else suffer, whether it be Manafort or whether it be Cohen, and then he hides. That's what cowards do. That's why they're dangerous. Just wanted to put that out there, brother.
Well, and you wonder, Kenyatta, to what extent is he willing to throw his own kids under the bus?
Well, we'll find out real soon, won't we?
We will. But that's going to be the real tell for me about how far he has gone into the world of sociopathy. Kenyatta, always great to hear from you. Thank you for the call. Nina in St. Paul, Nebraska. Hey, Nina, what's up?
Hi there. I'm calling about our governor.
Who is your governor?
Center for the Book, an affiliate of the Library of Congress.
Nina, who is your governor?
Called This Blessed Earth. A Year in the Life of an American Family.
Nina, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can.
Who is your governor?
Pete Ricketts.
Okay, and he's a Republican, I'm assuming, the governor of Nebraska.
He's a mini Donald Trump.
Okay, so continue your story. I just wanted to get that on the record for our listeners so they know who we're talking about here.
He never worked a day in his life. His parents own the Chicago Cubs.
Oh, the Ricketts family. They're billionaires.
Yep.
And big Republican donors. Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
This book, This Blessed Earth, A Year in the Life of an American Family, was chosen to be Book of the Year.
Is it about his family?
Pardon?
Is it about his family?
No, it's about the Hammond family, whose farm is on the KXL pipeline route.
Okay.
And the difficulties that they have experienced fighting TransCanada and etc.
Right.
And the governor refused to sign the proclamation because he said the book was divisive. Now, to give you a little history on the governor, he also has sent many donations to Steve King in Iowa and listed his occupation as self-employed farmer.
Right. Amazing.
Yeah.
So is there any substantial movement in Nebraska to throw off the Mr. Ricketts mini Trump?
He just won re-election, sad to say.
Uh-huh.
But they say that the book sales have gone through the roof for the book. And that was one of the things I was hoping that some of our fellow people in your listeners would consider buying This Blessed Earth, A Year in the Life of an American Farm Family.
Okay, great. You've put out the plug, Nina, and I'm trusting you that the book is what you say, and it's as good as you say, and I'll be looking for it myself. Nina, thank you for the call. Good luck. Corky in Rochester, New York. Hey, Corky, what's on your mind today?
Well, it's New York, and you're crying about Cohen with the payments under the table.
Are you talking about Trump's tweet this morning? Hey, Michael, a nice little family you got there. Be a shame if anything happened to your father-in-law.
Yeah. Remember the Godfather movie when they brought the old man in, the brother of the guy who's going to testify against Michael Corleone?
I don't.
Set him in they set him in the courtroom, and the guy refused to testify.
All right. So the question that you're raising, Corky, is will Trump's witness intimidation of Michael Cohen, or his attempts to intimidate the witness, be successful?
Well, I don't think so. I think Michael has got a bone to pick with Trump, and I think he's going to go through with it.
Yeah.
But I mean, just to threaten the family, it's a classic.
It's shocking. I mean, if President Obama had made a comment about the family of somebody who was one of his political opponents, essentially, or somebody who was preparing to rat him out for something, the right wing would be all over this. Oh, he's going Chicago. He's going street. He's got, which is what they said when he used the word damn, right? He's going street. He's like a Chicago thug, and we all know what that's code for. And it's just the thing that blows my mind is if you look at any one of 100 of these behaviors by Donald Trump, and you simply ask yourself the question: if President Obama had done the same thing, how would Fox News, how would the right wing, how would the right wing hate radio have reacted? And they would have him up for impeachment tomorrow morning. Corky, spot on. Thanks for the call, Don in Norcross, Georgia. Hey, Don, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom.
Hi, Don.
I was just the Daily Post article about families, relationships, and now Russia.
Don, I'm sorry. Your phone keeps dropping out every few seconds. Shira, Don is on line 2. If we can figure out what's going on, we can bring you back in a little later in the show. Joe in Chicago. Hey, Joe, what's up?
Hi. I just wanted to bring up something that was really glossed over as insignificant on the early days of the official Russian gate, when Franken got Sessions to admit that he talked to Russians during the campaign, and Sessions and everybody else brushed it off as some inconsequential hobnobbing at the GOP National Presidential Convention.
Right.
And I think that was extremely significant because I don't think the Russian ambassadors go to presidential nomination conventions. And if only that happened, like a Russian ambassador went to a DNC presidential national convention and was interacting with major players, that would be the Republicans' campaign for century about how the Democrats are communists.
Traitors!
And this was like, no big deal. I think it was an extremely big thing that never happened before that just got wallpapered over.
No, you're absolutely right, Joe, and one of many. But you're absolutely right. That's why I keep saying, try bringing the standards of a normal presidency to what's going on right now. And suddenly you go, whoa! Bob in Johnsburg, New York. Hey, Bob, what's up?
Hello, Tom. This is a quick one. I am absolutely totally out of information as to why in the last 235 years or so from the beginning of government, how the three branches of government haven't totally separated themselves so that the president cannot tell the Speaker of the House that you can't go to Afghanistan.
All right.
Why isn't the House totally independent?
He wasn't actually able to stop her. I mean, after he said you can't have a military aircraft, they were like, okay, we'll take a commercial aircraft. But then he leaked the details of the commercial trip. And at that point, the generals on the ground in Afghanistan said, we can't guarantee your safety now that Trump has leaked this stuff. Pentagon is freaking out over this. I mean, this is amazing. But Trump actually couldn't stop her except by breaking the law, by committing treason and leaking information to the enemies of the United States about when and where the Speaker of the House, number 3 in line to the presidency, the head of the Armed Forces Committee, the head of the Veterans Affairs Committee, where and when they would be in Afghanistan. When Trump leaked that, he committed a major treasonous act, in my opinion. Bob, thanks for the call. Joe in Cupertino. Hey, quick one, Joe. We got a little less than a minute.
Yes, Tom, real quick. It's just this RIFT program, the Reduction in Force of 1981.
Right.
Excuse me. Well, I did some research since you brought it up, and apparently on the 31st day, which will be Tuesday, we can start laying people off.
Well, yes and no. They can only do that if they were laid off initially, if they were put on furlough initially for administrative reasons. And that's not what's happened here. What's happened here is the government hasn't been funded. So Snopes, in fact, did a debunking of this. You can find it over at their website. The fact is that Donald Trump would have to initiate a whole completely different process, which I haven't seen him start, although he could do it, to riff out, to basically to fire, permanently fire, a large quantity of these federal workers. Say what, Joe?
It's amazing. Yes.
Yeah, it's amazing it's even possible. Joe, thanks for the call. We'll be right back. We're going to check in with Talk Media News here in about 4 minutes. It's 45 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program, the place where despair is not an option. And welcome back. And my call screener just crashed again. I don't know what's going on here. This is downright not good. So I'm going to try and bring up this other software too, and we'll see if that works. My apologies for going off on this. The Senate, Mitch McConnell just successfully, by the way, blocked a bill to reopen the Department of Homeland Security. I mean, that's pretty amazing. Dennis in Bergenfield, New Jersey. Hey, Dennis, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I have a question about the European debt crisis.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big one. If the Greek government were to default on its bonds issued by the bonds it issued by the French and German banks, how would that make it harder for the French and German, the governments of France and Germany to pay back the bonds they owe to other foreign investment banks?
I don't know, Dennis. I'm not conversant in the details of inter-euro bond financing. Logic kind of indicates that it could start a chain reaction that one could lead to another, but I don't know if that's the case.
Right. And also, what do you think of Elizabeth Warren's candidacy? Do you think she can beat Trump?
I think Elizabeth Warren could easily beat Donald Trump, and I think that there's a chance that she will. She seems to me so far as the strongest person in the Democratic field. I see.
Do you think Bernie will run?
I think Bernie's going to run, but I don't think that, and I hope he runs because he brings these issues. Roseanne DeMauro wrote about this on Common Dreams yesterday. He nails these issues down in a very clear and specific way, and he would become the benchmark that everybody else would have to measure themselves against. That said, I doubt that he will be the nominee for the Democratic Party. I think it's much more likely to be, somebody like Elizabeth Warren. We'll see. We'll see where it goes. I mean, right now we're seeing the Kirsten Gillibrand. I don't think she has a chance. People are so pissed off about what she did to Al Franken. I don't think Amy Klobuchar yet has the kind of national gravitas, although, Rachel's doing the best she can to help her. I think that Kamala Harris, now there's a piece in the New York Times today saying that when she was a prosecutor, she was not progressive. Yeah, Cory Booker has historically had some problems around the fact that he's not married, and is that going to reflect poorly in Middle America? I think it might. I can see the weaknesses of all these individual candidates, and Bernie's major weakness is his age, frankly. But I don't see that with Elizabeth Warren. Maybe I'm missing something, and this is a conversation that I think we should have next week in some more detail. Is who do you want, and who do you want to see? Beto O'Rourke. He's historically was not a progressive. Has he had a progressive conversion? Sort of like Kristen Gillibrand is claiming. Tulsi Gabbard. It's coming out that she was very, very homophobic, and now she's publicly apologizing for this. I really think that there are, some of these things are hills that these candidates can't go over. And I think that Tulsi Gabbard and Kristen Gillibrand in particular are not seriously running for president as much as they are building their brands. And, which is something that we saw writ large in the Republican primary last time. I think the rest of the candidates, though, are seriously, thinking about or seriously running for president. The other person that I see as very, very solid and has a real potential to become president is Sherrod Brown. And, at the end of the day, what wouldn't surprise me at all would be an Elizabeth Warren Sherrod Brown or a Sherrod Brown Elizabeth Warren ticket. Although it doesn't have racial balance, it at least has gender balance. But, we're going to just wait and see how it plays out. Dennis, thanks for the call. We'll be right back. Hey, if you're one of our Patreon sponsors or YouTube sponsors, be sure to check out the new video that's available talking about our poopy president. No, I don't mean that in a bizarre or even sarcastic way. It turns out that the number of people who are now hospitalized, many of them are going to need kidney transplants all around the United States. I mean, literally, their lives have been devastated and wiped out, is the result of a decision that Donald Trump made to tell his EPA to allow more cow poop, basically, to be intentionally or unintentionally used for irrigation of crops, specifically romaine lettuce. And thus, you are getting poisoned because he wants deregulation. Isn't that cool? Check out the video. It's coming up for all of our Patreon and YouTube sponsors. And thanks so much for supporting the program.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. On the line with us, the chief foreign correspondent for Talk Media News, joining us from the UN headquarters in New York, brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Ellen Ratner's new book, Loving What You Do. Luke Vargas is with us. You can hear Luke present one world news story a day in just 2 minutes by searching Luke Vargas wherever you get your podcasts. Hey, Luke, North Korea in the news?
That's right. Their top nuclear negotiator is in Washington today. He's met with the Secretary of State. He's also met with the president. So this went right to the top. Kim Young-chol is former spy chief of North Korea and also sort of playing the role of interlocutor on the nuclear issue. I think one really interesting thing that observers are watching here is that the U.S. Special Representative for North Korea, Steve Biegun, welcomed the North Korean delegation to the United States personally, which is a real effort to insert him into the process and hope that the North Koreans take him seriously as an interlocutor. You could see why, after, watching President Trump for the last month pivot policy on a dime because of one-off conversations we have with world leaders, that there's a desire on the part of the Secretary of State and others at the State Department and the intelligence community to put forward people who we are at least purporting to be credible intermediaries, because there's a nervousness that if you just leave this to Trump and Kim, that you're not going to get any real serious commitments. The president's going to be won over too easily. Someone like Steve Biegun, if he can be taken seriously by the North Koreans, is going to probably negotiate a much stricter line.
But here's the problem, Luke. Yeah. You've got President Trump, Donald Trump, actually lying to the American people about what's going on and how things are working out. He's saying, oh, yeah, Kim has stopped developing nuclear weapons. It's a lie. Kim is not going to deploy nuclear weapons. It's a lie. I mean, as long as the President of the United States lies to his base, lies to the American people about what's going on, how can you have a foreign policy that's based in lies?
No, I'm not sure this strategy is going to work, but I think it's quite telling that there's such a concerted effort by others within the administration to try and get themselves taken seriously, to try to get the U.S. government position imbued with some credibility in the eyes of North Koreans, because they clearly don't think they have it right now. So that is something to watch. I'll point out also, and this is again kind of comes around to the same point we just made with that last bit, which is it's a good development, but does it matter? There were secret, unannounced talks today, I guess they're not secret anymore, in Sweden between North Korea's deputy foreign minister and other top U.S. officials. So things are happening. I think we are. This is a sort of like the sort of push of meetings that we had on both in Asia and in New York City before the first Singapore summit last year. So I would guess that these rumors that Hanoi, Vietnam is being looked at for a site of a possible second summit, that seems to be holding true. And the timeline now for this, I think, is moving up, given the frequency, the sort of flurry of meetings we've been seeing. So again, I'm not so certain that the U.S. is going to be able to really, or top officials are going to be able to reassert U.S. credibility in these talks, but it looks like there's a push to have a second summit, and it's coming together quickly.
Remarkable. And meanwhile, in Syria, Bashar al-Assad is apparently trying to rehabilitate his image. Is that domestically, internationally, or both?
Well, I guess I've been watching international developments. There's been sort of a push from Assad himself. I think a lot of Syria's allies, though, are the ones sort of driving this. You have Lebanon hosting a meeting of the Arab League today. Lebanon's foreign minister coming out and appealing for Syria's membership in the Arab League to be reinstated after it was suspended in 2011 after the Arab Spring. I think what's pretty interesting, too, is you have sort of that dynamic. So, I think Lebanon we can understand. You've got a huge Hezbollah influence there. They're tied to Iran, an ally of Assad. There's a vested reason why they are pushing for normalization of Syria's diplomatic standing. The other dynamic, though, is sort of hey, we don't want to be left out as other countries start to make ties with Syria. And that is driving countries in the Arab Gulf to want to reopen their embassies. There was a great report in Haaretz several days ago, which basically suggested after the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain reopened their embassies in December last month, the Saudis and a number of other countries in the Gulf said, if we wait too long to make up with Assad after having for years tried to, create a political situation in which he might be forced out of office, then the Turks and the Iranians are going to be the only ones with a diplomatic footing in Damascus, and that's going to permanently sort of leave us out of Syria's future. And so I guess it's not because Assad has done anything to regain legitimacy in the eyes of the world. It's that you don't want to miss out.
Well, this is kind of a certification of the broad assumption that he's going to continue to hold power, based on A, his own strength within the country, and B, his support by Russia and Iran, right?
Yeah, and I think the final step you'll see are European countries start to do what the Gulf countries are talking about right now. There's been some talk. Italy might be the first country in Europe to really sort of reopen arms to the Syrians again. The Tunisians are doing the same thing. Obviously not Europe, but let's watch this. I think we are unfortunately seeing the rehabilitation of Syria if in sort of a roundabout way here. People realize this Assad's going to be around, and they'd rather work with him than not have any ability to even communicate.
I assume this has nothing to do with the death of 4 American soldiers in Syria.
No, these developments were in play before that.
Yeah, I guess some of them were contractors, but okay, great. Luke Vargas with Talk Media News. Thank you, Luke.
Thank you, Tom. Take care. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too. And a great holiday. Monday is MLK Day, just FYI if you missed it. So anyhow, it's Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be back with more of your calls and thoughts, my thoughts, the news of the day, all that kind of stuff right after this. It's coming up on the top of the hour here. you're one of our Patreon sponsors or YouTube sponsors, be sure to check out the new video that's available talking about our poopy president. No, I don't mean that in a bizarre or even sarcastic way. It turns out that the number of people who are now hospitalized, many of them are going to need kidney transplants all around the United States. I mean, literally, their lives have been devastated and wiped out, is the result of a decision that Donald Trump made to tell his EPA to allow more cow poop, basically, to be intentionally or unintentionally used for irrigation of crops, specifically romaine lettuce. And thus, you are getting poisoned because he wants deregulation. Isn't that cool? Check out the video. It's coming up for all of our Patreon and YouTube sponsors. And thanks so much for supporting the program. Book Club today, we're reading from Ralph Nader's new book, How the Rats Reformed the Congress, a fable. It's fiction. Chapter 1, Invader. It was one of those uncomfortable morning strategy sessions with his senior staff. For House Speaker Reginald Blamer, the discomfort was in having to figure ways to continue blocking a long overdue raise in the federal minimum wage for many millions of low-income workers when he knew in his gut it was not the right thing to do. We're in the crosshairs, he would say, starting such congressional meetings in his spacious office. Not that his anxiety would cause him to renege on the implicit promise he had made to the big boys to stop the move in Congress to raise the minimum. But there was still background anxiety. After all, politicians are only human, and like many, Speaker Blamer came from a large family that had lived through tightened circumstances. His father was a tavern keeper and his mother a seamstress. Deep anxiety, however, did have one inherent comfort at such morning gatherings. It tended to work in mysterious ways to overcome his morning constipation, the constant bane of the Speaker's existence. Holding down 30 million workers, including among them many conservative voters who, when adjusted for inflation, were making less today than workers in 1968, bothered the very private, self-censored, psychosomatic recesses of the Speaker's conscience. And so, not surprisingly, Speaker Blamer felt the onset of a solid bowel movement. He excused himself and repaired to his large private bathroom. As he sat down in the broad porcelain toilet, he felt that the expected discharge would be ample and prompt. No straining today. After quick breaks of wind, the Speaker heard a sound inside the toilet, but it wasn't from his bowels. Lifting himself up a bit, he looked down and saw the head of a mostly submerged black rat closely eyeing his bottom. "Yow, yow, yow," bellowed the Speaker as he straightened up and slammed the cover down. Alarmed, the staff rushed to the bathroom door to respectfully call, "Speaker Blamer, are you all right? Do you need help?" They dared not open the door. The Speaker did not tolerate any exposure of his privacy, especially being seen in his corpulent native suit. Another more normal person might have replied, "Yeah, I'm okay. It's just that there's a rat in the toilet bowl." But Speaker Blamer was not a normal person. He has had to be super cunning to get to his present situation in life. Being cunning means that you can instantly sense danger, being as alert as, say, a rat. And Speaker Blamer was already imagining the deriding headlines in the late-night show jokes if he disclosed what really prompted his impulsive cries of sheer terror as he leapt from the throne. So he replied, "Nothing much, boys, just one of those sudden spasms I get once in a while. Sure comes on fast, it goes away fast, too. I'll be right out." Rejoining the staff at the head of the conference table, albeit full of gas and undischarged wastes, the Speaker went through the checklist for crushing the hopes of the downtrodden multitudes. His chief of staff reviewed the usual elements of the campaign against workers. First off, the Speaker will say, "I always thought that if you raise the price of anything, you get less of it. The proposal to raise the minimum wage is a job killer." "Good soundbite," said his research assistant. The Speaker nodded gravely, though when he heard the word bite, he silently winced. The operations assistant counted off the usual reliable economics professors who could supply objective warnings about losses of jobs in recession. The Fast Food and Big Box Retailer Association had begun a large ad buy on television and radio with the announcers' stentorian voices of dire gravity. The K Street lobbyists were already in action on Capitol Hill, marshaling the corporate PACs to make sure this drive was on the front burner, hinting to legislators that their employers might see this as a litmus test for their donations. Op-eds, letters to the editors, and editorial condemnation of economically disruptive higher wages and layoffs was already in the pipeline. About to burst, the Speaker could not wait to end the meeting. "Okay, fellows, you seem to have the situation well in hand. It's not the first time we had to fight off this wage grab. Get to work." They all scattered, including an irrelevant intern who wondered to herself whether paying members of Congress would mean the government would end up with less of them. Paying members of Congress more, excuse me. The moment the door to his spacious office closed, the Speaker literally lunged to his private toilet, whereupon he unloaded a vast quantity of feces, soft and semi-hard, 3 bursts worth. Before he could enjoy a moment of quiet satisfaction, a shrill shriek lifted him up as his eyes bulged. It was the black rat swimming in the bowl, propelling the terrified cry, yow, yow, yow. Again, he slammed down the toilet seat, kept his hand on the flush toilet handle, gritting his teeth as if to say, on the way to oblivion, you dirty rat. His longtime secretary heard his yell and rushed to his bathroom. Mr. Speaker, what happened? Are you okay? Recovering his composure, he replied, I'm okay, Sarah, just more of those sudden spasms. I've got to get some physical therapy. By the way, did you schedule that fundraiser next week for an hour later? Yes, I did, Mr. Speaker, Sarah replied, sounding very relieved. Arriving home that early evening, he sat down to a healthy diet supper prepared by his adoring wife, Regina. Their 3 children were grown up, living in distant states, so they were empty nesters. You seem unusually agitated, honey, said Regina. Did you have a hard day? It seems every day is hard in these times, he replied, shrugging off her concern. What a great meal always, Regina. Now I need some relaxing reading. Do you know where we put that colorful book of animals that we got as a wedding gift, anniversary gift years ago? Why, yes, Reginald. It came in 3 volumes, mammals, reptiles, and insects. Tell me which one you want, and I'll get it for you. Mammals, he replied. Sitting in his study, the Speaker started reading about the rat. The word rat is derived from the Latin rodere, which means to gnaw. Rats produce litter several times a year with high infant mortality. If seen as weak, newborns are eaten by their parents and their stronger siblings. Over the centuries, rats have developed uncanny abilities to survive dangers everywhere, especially those produced by their close proximity to humans, whose detritus and garbage ironically provide the means by which they prosper and create new nests. Rats live everywhere, underground, in sewers and buildings, etc. Ralph Nader.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
This is so strange. Welcome back, by the way. I was looking for a list of the Republican senators who voted to reduce the sanctions on the Russian oligarch Deripaska, the guy who was in tight with Trump and Cohen and all these guys. And I looked at the New York Times article, Democrats fall short in Russia sanctions votes. They say 11 Republicans joined Democrats in the vote to enforce sanctions, and they list those, the good Republicans, but they don't list the Republicans who didn't. And then I went back and I looked at the Washington Post story. Same deal. No list of the Republicans who voted to reduce the sanctions on Deripaska. Instead, it was a list of the 11 Republicans who voted to continue the sanctions. Very strange. It's like, it's just like the media doesn't talk about Bill Barr's role in 1992 in ending the Iran-Contra investigation on behalf of George Herbert Walker Bush and Ronald Reagan. And it's just like, it's vanished from our media landscape. I just find it fascinating. I don't know what or why, but it's pretty amazing. Nancy Pelosi has come right out and basically said it. This is from Manu Raju over on CNN. He says, he tweeted this. Pelosi told reporters that White House leaking of their travel plans scrapped their trip, calling it very irresponsible and saying it endangered lawmakers traveling there. Donald Trump endangered the lives of these people. If Barack Obama had done this, where would we be right now? If Barack Obama had tweeted out highly classified information about the whereabouts of a Republican congressional delegation going to a war zone, do you think he'd still be in office? I mean, obviously he's not in office right now, but I think he would have been impeached in a New York minute. Meanwhile, Melania is actually flying on a government plane down to Mar-a-Lago. Yeah, no problem there. But you can't use a government plane for Nancy Pelosi. Do you get how weird this is? And then we find out that Donald Trump personally directed Michael Cohen to lie to Congress, which is a crime. And this is after he directed Michael Cohen to pay off 2 women that he'd had affairs with so that it wouldn't get into the campaign, which is a crime. I mean, here we have actual felonies, you go to prison, Donald Trump, felonies. And apparently, continuing to negotiate with the Russians while he's running for president. I'm not talking about the primaries here. I'm talking about the general election. It was so obvious to Donald Trump that he wasn't going to win that his safety net was, after he lost the White House, he was going to build a Trump Tower hotel, a 100-story building, a Trump Tower in downtown Moscow. And they were continuing the negotiations right up to Election Day, according to Michael Cohen. And now Cohen is saying, yeah, and not only that, but I told the Trump kids about this. I kept them up to date on it. I told Ivanka, I told Don Jr. And we don't know about Kusei, but, he certainly told Uday. And when this story comes out, what does Donald Trump do? Does he deny it? No, he did not deny it. He tweeted that Michael Cohen's father-in-law should be investigated. Nice little family you got there, Michael. It'd be a shame if something happened to your father-in-law. Do you get this? I mean, this is government by mafia. And then on top of this, you've got Jeff Merkley releasing this just astonishing story, this bombshell, that Kirstjen Nielsen's protestations, we do not have a policy of separating families at the border, period. June 17th, 2018. I'm not a liar. We never had a policy for family separation, she says. Now Merkley has the memo. It was given to him by a whistleblower in the DHS. Unit 2, separate family units. Begin separating family units. She was lying through her teeth, as was Trump. And then another lie. This is one that is really big on Fox so-called news, on billionaire oligarch Rupert Murdoch's television network. And that lie is that, Obama was separating children from their families. Well, yeah, it happened a couple of times when the parents were a threat to the children. There were a few very abusive parents who dragged kids along, and there were apparently a few people who showed up with kids that had been kidnapped saying, this is my kid, give me asylum. And variations on that. But separating children from their families who are just like normal families, no, never happened under Obama. But that lie is being promoted constantly, and in fact, part of this plan, advocacy groups are aware that this policy shift may occur and therefore are seeking to identify families who have been separated in order to bring a class action lawsuit. In other words, they say right in their memo, we're changing the policy from the Obama policy, and it's going to upset some of these people. False claim. She said, I find it offensive that you suggest that we're doing this as a deterrent. No, it's in the memo. She said it's violent criminals are the reason we have to build more detention facilities. No, in the memo, it says that they're going to have to do it because these families are going to be split up. More lies out of this administration. It's mind-boggling. How can you not impeach this? JR in Sholo, Arizona. Hey, JR, what's on your mind today?
Oh, my goodness. You're taking the words right out of my mouth, Tom. Discussing facts with Republicans and, Trump supporters is like kicking water uphill.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work. It's such a futile practice.
I've never heard that phrase. It's a great one, JR.
Well, there's so much I want to say,
Well, pick one thing.
I was always an independent voter.
Mm-hmm.
I always took my voting privilege and things like that very seriously. And this year, I'm proud to say I'm a Democrat. There is no way in heck I'm not going to let the Republicans know how I feel.
Yeah, they have sold out to overseas oligarchs and domestic oligarchs. So the Republican Party is a wholly owned subsidiary of Koch Industries. It certainly looks like to me.
They've sold out to the truth, and the truth does not tell lies.
Yeah, amen.
How do they have little, do they have lessons for little Republican children, like how to perfect your lying, how to get what you want, how to throw the tantrum? I mean, what are we teaching our children? What kind of world is this?
Yes, they are, and it's all on Fox News.
Okay.
I mean, it's just all on Fox News.
Just the way Trump conducts himself, and they get behind him. It's like the Flat Earther Society saying we have members all around the globe.
Right.
It's just, are you kidding?
Here's some of the headlines over at Media Matters for America, MediaMatters.org. Ingram says that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez used minority privilege to criticize Fox News. NRA TV host likens Colin Kaepernick to Satan. Fox News spent months on end declaring there was no collusion between Trump's campaign and Russia. Fox and Friends downplays bombshell report that Trump instructed his lawyer to lie to Congress. I mean, when you've got a billionaire oligarch running a television network exclusively for the benefit of other billionaire oligarchs, you have a genuine danger to democracy. JR, thanks for the call. Well said. Michael in Santa Rosa, listening on Real Talk 910. Hey, Michael, what's up?
Yeah, how you doing, Tom? Thanks for taking my call.
Great,
I'm on HUD, and I've been on HUD for 10 years, and HUD is experimenting with energy weapons. They use LRAD to chase people out of their apartments, and now this is the latest thing for houses since the fires here. But I'm getting facial deformities, or the sides of my head are caving in. You start to look like an aluminum can, and everybody around me is ex-military. You're put in an embedded perimeter, and even when I had Comcast, I had a perimeter grid come up on my screen, and my neighbors all around me are getting robbed.
Michael, it sounds to me like you have some real challenges in your life, and I hope that you can find some, appropriate and reasonable help for that, because, that sounds somewhat delusional, frankly. Please check in with your health professional. It's 15 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. It's Anything Goes Friday. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Speaking the truth, some multinational corporations would really rather you didn't know all about. Thom Hartmann here with you. We'll be right back with more of Anything Goes Friday. And welcome back. Ron in Seattle, listening on KBCS. Hey, Ron, what's up?
Well, Tom, I hope that you are around much longer than our current Republican legislators are, because you do a real service.
Me too.
I'd like to talk a little bit more about the Republican Party.
Mm-hmm.
They are showing a lot of support for sort of the mafia tactics in our government right now, but they do have a fallback position, and their fallback is to divide everybody. So my question is, we do have a two-party system. How do you see this working out for the nation in the current, if the current administration continues their tactics and they become embedded? It's just sort of dismal.
Yeah, this has been going on for about 40 years now, Ron. It's just gotten worse and worse and worse. And that is the takeover of an entire political party, in this case the Republican Party, by a small group of billionaire oligarchs here in the United States. And now apparently they've been joined by overseas oligarchs as well, from Russia, from Israel, from Saudi Arabia, from Indonesia and Malaysia. The Republican Party is just totally the billionaire party. And one of two things is going to happen. Either they're going to survive and continue just to be this incredibly corrupt and malignant influence on American democracy, which puts the entire country at risk. It puts our democracy at risk, and already has. I mean, this is where we're at right now. This is a genuine crisis of governance. Or the truth is going to come out and the Republican Party is going to collapse. I'm skeptical that that's going to happen. I think it's entirely possible that Donald Trump will be brought down, but I think that they're going to insulate themselves, the rest of the party, from this. Mike Pence will become president. He'll appoint somebody else as vice president, and they'll just roll on in their merry way, because they have this mind-boggling amount of money behind them with all these billionaire oligarchs. So, that's my sense of it, is that the GOP is not doing anything all that different now than they were doing during the Reagan era. It's just that they're doing much more of it, and they're doing it much more blatantly. So, do you think they can survive?
I like what I'm seeing from the Democrats right now, from the new Congress, from the people who are considering running for president. So there is some hope there, but thanks for your time.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks a lot, Ron. Good to hear from you. Jeff in Arcata, California. Hey, Jeff, thanks for watching Free Speech. What's up?
Hi, Tom. I've been wondering, with our mainstream media is just sort of skirting around the issue about what Trump and Putin talked about behind closed doors. And
well, nobody knows what they talked about. That's the problem.
Well, I think you can look at the shutdown and you can call it the Putin shutdown. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I don't think that's going to get any traction because there's no direct evidence. But it certainly, to hobble, to cripple the United States of America certainly advances the interests of any country that doesn't want to see a strong United States.
Yeah, that's what worries me. We've got Trump trying on his dictator mantle right now. He's
he's trying to go full Mussolini. I mean, going after Nancy Pelosi like that, that's just, it's not just petty. It is also, like you say, dictatorial. It's an attempt to be a strongman. And then it leaks out. Jeff, thanks for the call. Then it leaks out that inside the White House, after Pelosi said no State of the Union, they had a conversation about how to, quote, put her in her place. Are you getting this? We'll be right back. Hey, if you're one of our Patreon sponsors or YouTube sponsors, be sure to check out the new video that's available talking about our poopy president. No, I don't mean that in a bizarre or even sarcastic way. It turns out that the number of people who are now hospitalized, many of them are going to need kidney transplants all around the United States. I mean, literally, their lives have been devastated and wiped out, is the result of a decision that Donald Trump made to tell his EPA to allow more cow poop, basically, to be intentionally or unintentionally used for irrigation of crops, specifically romaine lettuce. And thus, you are getting poisoned because he wants deregulation. Isn't that cool? Check out the video. It's coming up for all of our Patreon and YouTube sponsors. And thanks so much for supporting the program.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
If you've got it. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Luther in Benton, Arkansas. Hey, Luther, what's on your mind today? It says here you disagree with me.
Oh, I disagree with you on everything, Mr. Hartmann, but I appreciate you taking my phone call.
Sure. Let's pick one thing to discuss. Okay?
Well, my question,
my
question for you is this, because you are sitting here talking about Trump getting prosecuted, impeached, all that for lying. And by the way, my feeling is if you're lying to the American people, you're lying to Congress. I don't care who you are, you deserve whatever you get. Okay?
Then we agree on something, Luther.
Well, no, hold on a second. I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican. But my question for you is when the shoe's on the other foot and it's a Democrat, are you going to sit there and say they need to be prosecuted, they need to go to jail, or will you make excuses for them?
Yeah.
I rarely hear you condemn Democrats for their actions.
Well, name a Democratic action that's a crime. I mean, we have here evidence that Donald Trump committed crimes. He became elected president based on a fraud. He lied. He paid several $100,000 to cover up the fact that he had these two affairs. And you can't tell me he'd be president if that had come out. I mean, so he became president by virtue of fraud. And that's a violation, a felony violation, a 10-year in prison felony violation of campaign finance laws. And now it looks like he told Michael Cohen to lie to Congress. And, about specifically the crimes that he was committing. In this case, as he was running for president, negotiating with Russians to build a Trump Tower in Moscow. I mean, that another thing that would blow up a candidacy. So if that's what is being discussed, I mean, if any Democrat had done those things, I would be at the front of the line, Luther, calling for them to be impeached.
First of all, I'm just going to respectfully disagree with you on that part. I don't think you would.
Try me out. Give me a name of a Democrat who's committed a crime.
Hillary Clinton.
What's the crime?
she's lied.
About what?
Okay. What has she not lied about?
Well, tell me one thing that Hillary Clinton lied about.
Hold on. She lied about her email servers. We all know that. You can go back and either she lied or Comey lied, because I watched it this morning while listening to your show. 2 different testimonies in front of Congress. Either she lied or he lied, which means whoever lied's got to go to jail, right?
Well, let me get this straight, Luther. George W. Bush had...
We're not talking about George Bush.
I know.
You asked me a specific question, and I said Clinton. I gave you an example.
All right. So George W. Bush lost 5.5 million emails because they were held on a private server by a company in Kentucky, the company that tallied the vote for Ohio in the 2004 election. He lost 5 million, and all of Karl Rove's emails are lost. They're gone forever. I didn't hear any outrage from Republicans about that. Right now, you've got people inside the Trump administration using private servers. I'm not hearing any outrage about that. When Hillary Clinton moved her email to a private server in her home where she could have control over it, so that, you know, she felt it would be more safe and secure than a commercial, you know, than Gmail or something like that. I don't know that she lied about it. I thought she was right up front that this is what happened. I mean, you could give me a time and a place that she lied about it. But B, I don't see why that's, you know, a crime specifically, particularly given that, you know, George W. Bush was doing the same thing.
Let me ask you a question about the Clinton thing you just said.
Yeah.
All right. Because you're talking about Trump and the Russians. We all know Clintons have been paid money by the Russians to go give speeches.
Yeah.
What else have they been paid by the Russians to do?
I don't know, but I think that the Clintons have, in their zeal to become worth hundreds of, or, you know, over $100 million, and apparently they are now, they have, in my opinion, compromised themselves, their own reputations, and that of the Democratic Party. And I think it hurt the Democratic Party very badly, a lot of the things that Bill Clinton has done over the years. But that said, I don't think that they should go to jail for it.
I do agree with you. I do agree with you on that. And believe me, being from Arkansas, knowing the Clintons, how this state knows them.
Yeah, but the Clintons are not, you know, Bill Clinton is not president. He has not been president for more than 20 years, or 18 years, I guess, 19 years. And Hillary Clinton is not president, so let's talk about what's really going on here, Luther. Why would you continue to support and defend a man who has demonstrably, at least twice, committed felonies that involve, you know, flipping one of our elections upside down? How is that not the worst kind of crime a politician can commit?
I never said I supported him. I never said I even voted for him. Matter of fact, I called your show during the elections and told you I wouldn't vote for Trump.
Then I don't get your beef here, Luther.
I didn't vote. I think it's hypocritical of you and the Democrats to be doing all of this, knowing that when the shoes are on the other foot, you're going to do everything you can to defend that Democrat.
I am not seeing Democrats committing crimes. You know, you look at the Obama administration, for 8 years, you had probably the most ethical, honorable president in the history of the United States. Look at the Jimmy Carter administration. Same thing. I'm seeing criminals on the Republican side. Multiple felonies committed by Ronald Reagan and George Herbert Walker Bush. Multiple felonies committed by Richard Nixon. Multiple felonies committed and lying to the American people about weapons of mass destruction by George W. Bush. And now multiple felonies by Donald Trump. You know, you can call it partisan, Luther, but when you can show me crimes the Democrats are committing, and I'm not hearing that, then maybe I guess we can have a conversation. We'll be back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Anything Goes Friday. We'll be back with more of your calls right after this. Our book for the Thom Hartmann Book Club today is A Nation Forged by Crisis, A New American History by Jay Sexton. And I'm reading from the introduction. This is page 9. The quest for national security and global power, America's shifting position in the international economy, and fluctuations in immigration have made the United States the nation that it is today. Americans' foreign relations have been conditioned its history not only in their cumulative effects over the long haul, but also as a result of their volatility. In periods of crisis, America's position in the world has lurched in unexpected directions. For as inexorable as the rise of the United States appears in retrospect, there have been contingent moments in which the very existence of our nation was up for grabs. This is the essence of crisis. The world turned upside down, the known replaced by the unknown, panic reigning as people struggle to maintain their balance and shifts in the very ground beneath their feet. It came with a speed and ferocity that left men dazed, New York Times correspondent Elliot Bell wrote of Wall Street's catastrophic collapse in October of 1929. Quote, the market seemed like an insensate thing that was wreaking a wild and pitiless revenge upon those who thought to master it, end quote. Crises are contagious, spreading like viruses from one realm to another. It's not without reason that the word crisis was associated with medical conditions and health scares in the 19th century. Each of the periods under consideration in this book were less a singular crisis than a set of interlinked crises. A political crisis could trigger an economic panic, which in turn could intensify social conflict, and so on. As these pandemics spread through the body politic, crisis itself was normalized, becoming an almost accepted characteristic of an age. Just as foreign crises have spread to the United States, domestic ones have spilled across its borders, unsettling foreign countries and peoples, as well as reconfiguring America's connections to the world. Consider the fateful winter of secession that followed the 1860 election of Abraham Lincoln. The crisis over slavery that divided the Union into warring sections that led to a series of sharp reversals in America's position in the global system. The foreign capital that had rushed into the roaring American economy in the preceding decades suddenly began to flee. Indeed, more capital left the United States in 1860 to 1862 than came into it. Also a once-in-a-century occurrence. One of the world's most valuable commodities and America's largest exports, Southern cotton, was confined to the ports of the Confederacy as a result of Richmond's ill-fated diplomatic strategy, leading to unemployment and social unrest in the British textile town of Lancashire. The most unexpected reversal was how the national security that the United States had attained after the war against Mexico in the 1840s was suddenly imperiled, with European powers encroaching once again upon the Western Hemisphere. Meanwhile, the Confederate emissaries across the Atlantic were in search of alliance with Britain. Our country, Secretary of State William Seward lamented in early 1861, after having expelled all European powers from the continent, now threatened to relapse into an aggravated form of its colonial experience, and like India, Turkey, China, and Italy, become the theater of transatlantic intervention and rapacity. A wider view of American history that looks beyond the nation's borders brings into focus not only the migration patterns, economic flows, and international rivalries that have connected the United States to the world, but also those rare moments in which the very existence of the nation was in question. Perhaps none was more pregnant with implications than the autumn of 1877, when the fate of the Patriots' bid for independence hung in the balance. Having proclaimed their independence to the world the previous 4th of July, their cause had stalled on the battlefield and in the diplomatic courts of the old world. I think the game is pretty near up, Washington privately confessed at year's end. To accomplish their independence is not quite so easy as to declare it, the British philosopher Jeremy Bentham haughtily remarked. But then a series of events forever changed the course of modern history. The stunning Patriot victory at the Battle of Saratoga in October, the drafting of the Articles of Confederation in November that, for all its limitations, further demonstrated the political resolve of the Americans. And most of all, the alliance signed with France in February 1778, which provided the Patriots with the resources, military assistance, and naval power that ultimately tipped the scales in their favor. There are comparable Saratoga moments in other crises in U.S. history, as we shall see. These contingent moments played out in their own distinctive ways, but are joined by a common denominator that has been curiously forgotten in our age of U.S. global power. Foreign states and people have played decisive roles in the critical moments of American history. As we make our way through our own era of global instability, in an unprecedentedly interconnected world, there's perhaps no more important lesson from the past to keep in mind. Crisis may beget crisis, Franklin Roosevelt said, as his administration transitioned from battling the Great Depression to entering the Second World War. But the progress underneath does not wholly halt. It does go forward, end quote. Like so many of Roosevelt's public statements, this one reveals a truth even as it conceals others. The United States came out on the other side of its greatest crises as a stronger and more efficiently organized nation, as Roosevelt suggested. The process of mobilizing resources to counter threats catalyzed innovations in political economy, such as the creation of a national financial system during the Civil War, and the economic reforms of the New Deal. The book is A Nation Forged by Crisis by Jay Sexton.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Let's check out our geeky science for the day. Indeed. The National GMO Awareness Group, Moms Across America, sent a bunch of wine to a lab in St. Louis, Microbe Intech Lab, and said, is there any glyphosate in these? Now, glyphosate is the chemical manufactured by Monsanto that's sold under the brand name Roundup. It was originally patented as an insecticide, as a antibiotic, because it kills bacteria. It disrupts the metabolic pathways of bacteria the same way it does plants. It's an herbicide, actually, is what it's typically sold for. And thus, it has the potential, at least this is the theory that a lot of people are working on right now, to destroy beneficial gut bacteria. The reason why there's an epidemic of upset stomachs in America, and your gut bacteria is like 70% of your immune system. It's a good chunk of your immune system. And also in concentrations as little as 1/10 of 1 part per trillion of glyphosate has been shown to stimulate the growth of breast cancer cells. So they took a bunch of wine from these 3 counties in California, from Napa Valley, Sonoma, and Mendocino counties, sent it to this lab, and what they found was that all of the wine had glyphosate in it, all of it. And the highest level was from a conventional chemically farmed vineyard. It was a Cabernet Sauvignon. The lowest was from a 2013 Syrah from a biodynamic organic vineyard. The organic one, the glyphosate level was less than 1 part per billion. The chemically farmed one was, where to go here? 28 times higher. It was 18.7 parts per billion. So keep in mind, 1/10 of 1 part per billion of glyphosate has been shown to destroy beneficial gut bacteria. As little as 1/10 of 1 part per trillion of glyphosate has also been shown to stimulate the growth of breast cancer cells. Of the 57,000 pounds of glyphosate Roundup used in Napa County in 2013, 50,000 pounds are applied to vineyards. Breast cancer rates in Napa, Sonoma, and Mendocino counties are 10 to 20% higher than the national average. Wow. The organic wine company, our old friend Veronique Raskin runs this company called the Organic Wine Company, and they actually have imported French organic wines as well as California organic wines. No glyphosate coming from France, to the best of my knowledge. Not that I'm plugging. Well, I guess I am. I think they've got a great product. Nothing wrong with that. Charles in Vancouver, Washington. Hey, Charles, what's on your mind? It's Anything Goes Friday.
Hey, Tom, thank you for taking my call, sir.
Sure.
Go back to time of the summer of 2016, before the last presidential election, and my other half and I were in a beautiful Oregon coast town that celebrates the harvesting of the cranberries. And to this day, I still see the first float that came down the street. Small main street in downtown, about 4,000 or 5,000 people might have been there at the most. And the first float is a float where there's an Uncle Sam pounding a gavel. There's a Hillary Clinton behind bars, and there's an endless tape loop that says "Lock her up."
Really?
Now, yes, sir. And the town was Bandon. Your listeners won't know unless they know the state of Oregon and Washington.
Bend, Oregon is over in the central part of the state. It's a very, very conservative area. Did you say Bend?
No, I said Bandon.
Bandon. Oh, I have no idea where that is.
Yeah, Bend is a 5 hours south of Portland. So,
okay. Yeah.
Anyway, I was appalled, didn't quite know what to say, wanted to say something. I wrote letters to the editor. Mm-hmm. My point is that still sticks in my mind greatly as we fast forward to now, when there's a couple words apparently evident. One is accountability. The other one is hypocrisy. And, I'm a 63-year-old man who's worked since I was 12 years old. I'm I find myself in some great difficulty because of a bad judgment I made. And I have lost my livelihood and everything else along with my my
I'm
bad
sorry to hear
judgment.
that, Charles.
But no, but I'll still be watching you, Tom. But I see, way back when in high school, Tom, when we used to say the Pledge of Allegiance, my friend and I would say, with liberty and justice for those with money and deep pockets.
Yeah,
and I don't think anything has changed, and I'm very saddened.
Yeah.
And those in leadership should be held accountable more than any of us. And there's a real skewering of our cultural values going on, and I'm not quite sure what to do about it. Not sure what I can do about it, but I do appreciate that you bring these issues to the forefront for many people that don't know anything about the issues.
Thank you, Charles. I think that what's incumbent on all of us is to stand up and speak out, to participate where we can, to make a change. I mean, we have to save this world. I mean, there's just no other way to say it. Charles, thanks so much for the call. By the way, just FYI, the first article of impeachment against Richard Nixon, reads that Richard Nixon deserves to be impeached for, quote, approving, condoning, acquiescing in, and counseling witnesses with respect to giving of false or misleading statements to lawfully authorized investigative officers and employees of the United States. Exactly what Michael Cohen is now saying Donald Trump told him to do, lie to Congress. Darwin in Weatherford, Texas. Hey, Darwin, what's up?
Hello, Tom. I ran for city council about 2 years ago, and I'm a Democrat here in Weatherford, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to tell you, our environment here has just gone to hell. The trash and accumulations are in my part of town, and it's just terrible all up and down the streets, and loose dogs. And I want to tell you something. I love animals. In fact, I have 2 dogs, but it's not safe to even walk up or take a stroll on our city streets on this.
Why is that, Darwin?
Well, the city council doesn't care. They're all Republicans, although it's supposed to be a nonpartisan council.
Right.
And they don't care. They're not and our utilities are high as they can be, and also our taxes. I can hardly make it each month. And anyway, I just wanted to tell you, the Commission on Environmental Quality of Texas, it's like they're non-existent. You never hear from them.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if the Democrats, if later, if Trump is out of there, will we be able to get EPA enforcement in Texas?
Not while Mike Pence is president. And and this is all the more the tragedy. This is the capture of the Republican Party by the fossil fuel billionaires. And right now, literally as we speak, a lot of government employees are laid off, but on the Interior Department, they're processing applications for oil companies and coal mining companies to buy federal lands for pennies on the dollar and then go in and ruin our national parks. I mean, that's literally going on as we speak. Darwin, I wish I could offer you more hope, but I think until this Republican Party completely crashes and burns, or laws are changed so the billionaires can't own Republicans anymore, it's going to continue going the way it is, which is terrible to say, but But good on you for running for city council, and good on you for being an activist. You need to be talking to the other Democrats in town and getting something going here. Adam in Eureka, California, listening to KGOE. Hey, Adam, what's up?
Hey, thank you for all you do, including the books and this show.
Thank you.
The first thing I wanted to mention is that I was listening earlier in the week, and a guy called a truck driver talking about a family ski trip and the cost of that.
Mm-hmm.
And something I think about with Democrats is they don't really have good messaging. But how this relates is I was thinking about health care. And if health care is covered universally, wouldn't that drop the cost in so many things, such as a family vacation to a park where you're not concerned about the health expense, which is rolled in? Or if you go to Disneyland, the part of your ticket covers a lawsuit in case you get hurt. Would that come out of the cost of living? Like driver's insurance and car insurance, wouldn't that go down if the health part was covered?
It would. As an employer, I would no longer have to pay for what's the word? It's if somebody gets disabled on the job or hurt on the job, there's a particular type of
workers' comp.
Workman's comp. Thank you. Yeah, the health side of that, I would not have to pay.
I don't know why the Democrats don't brand and put that out there that it may cost a fraction of your income, but all the other things in American life would go down in value unless a corporation is going to try and still leech that from us. But
you mean they go down in price? Yeah, you're absolutely right, Adam.
It should go down in price. It should increase our standard of living.
This is why every other developed country in the world, the other 33 of the 34 OECD countries, all have national health care programs. We're the only ones who don't. We're the village idiots, and it's at the behest of libertarian right-wing billionaires that have billionaires like Stephen Hemsley, who runs United Healthcare. Adam, thank you for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's Anything Goes Friday. Your calls on, whatever you'd like to talk about. Although one of the big questions here is, is Trump going to be impeached now? Looks like it. And welcome back. Logan, watching Free Speech TV in Macon, Georgia. Hey, Logan, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, hi, Tom.
Hey, Logan.
Have you heard anything about the minimum wage being increased? Democrat introduced a bill.
Yeah, they actually passed it out of the House of Representatives, raising the minimum wage to $15 nationwide by 2024, and which is just 5 years from now. And it goes up every year in stages toward that. Mitch McConnell will not allow it to come forward in the Senate.
Oh, that's what I want to talk about. Everybody talking about this impeachment and the plane ride and all that. That would be news we need to be talking about.
So what alternatively did you want to talk about?
Yeah, will it get passed? Will it go through? The bill, will it go through?
Oh, if Trump is impeached, it still won't go through. The Republicans will still control the Senate. And, legislation to raise the minimum wage still won't happen. It is happening state by state. There's, a number of states that increase their minimum wages, mostly by ballot measure over the last, in the election in November. And, that's happening all over the country. And keep in mind, a $15 minimum wage just takes the minimum wage back to where it was in 1968, more or less.
Right.
So, yep.
But it get passed federally, then it'd be universal all over the country, right?
That's correct. It would be the federal government directing the states to, here's the federal minimum, because the federal minimum wage right now is $7.25 an hour. Some states simply default to the federal minimum wage. Others have their own minimum wage. So states could set it higher. They just couldn't set it lower. Logan, thanks for the call. It's good to hear from you. Deborah in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Hey, Deborah, what's up?
Hi, Tom. You were mentioning that you didn't see any Republicans who voted against that oligarch.
Yeah. No, there were 11 Republicans who voted against him, but there were a bunch of Republicans who voted for him, including Mitt Romney and Lindsey Graham and apparently Mitch McConnell. But I've been unable to find a list. Do you have the list?
Oh, no. I thought you were talking about who voted it down.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
I know Justin Amash was one who voted.
Oh, that was in the House of Representatives. In the House of Representatives, there were only 53 Republicans who voted to not put to not have the sanctions. The majority of the Republicans in the House and all of the Democrats in the House voted to keep the sanctions against Deripaska in place, or against his companies.
Well, with the Senate, that's no surprise.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is, Mitch McConnell has literally and absolutely no respect for the rule of law in the United States. He ignored the Constitution and defied President Obama after Scalia died in putting in Merrick Garland on the Supreme Court. It's breathtaking.
I know it is.
Yeah.
All right, Tom, thanks.
Thanks a lot, Deborah. Good to hear from you, and thanks for watching us on Facebook Live. I mean, this is serious stuff. Mitch McConnell is you talk about supporting perjury. He is devastating the small d democratic process in our small r republic. We're supposed to be a nation of laws. We're supposed to be a nation of lawmakers who make laws, and you've got one guy in the Senate who is preventing the Senate from voting on reopening the government. He's preventing the Senate from voting on raising the minimum wage. He's preventing the Senate from voting on H.R. 1, which is this collection of changes to election policies that makes it illegal for states to have racially done gerrymanders and racially done suppression of voting. I mean, one guy, Mitch McConnell, is trying to hold America back in 1950. It's nuts. Well, it's wrong. We'll be back with more of your calls on Anything Goes Friday right after this. It's 48 minutes past the hour. You know, here at the Thom Hartmann Program, we're creating basically 3 programs identically at the same time. We've got the normal commercial program. We have our television program that is carried by Free Speech TV, and we do fundraisers for Free Speech TV, and a small amount of that money comes back to us, which helps us provide that show to Free Speech TV. So that stream has its own revenue stream in it. And then we also provide a nonprofit radio show with no commercials in it that's completely nonprofit compliant to our Pacifica affiliates, to the stations all over the country, nonprofit stations. We pay for that one because we don't charge them by your support at Patreon. And in exchange for that, over on Patreon, you can get the full 3-hour show, archives of the show, and special clips like this amazing clip that we're just now putting up about 6 ways America is becoming a third world country. Check it out, patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope this clip was useful to you, and thanks so much for supporting our program.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
/Thom. Welcome back. Bob in San Jose listening on AM 910. Hey, Bob, out of San Francisco. What's up?
Well, I was going to ask, let us assume that Trump gets impeached. Is Pence tangled up in that enough that he would be handicapped or kneecapped, as you say, as vice president becoming president? Or would he just continue on like a steamroller?
I think in all probability it'll be the latter. I published a piece a couple of months ago on common dreams and alternate and whatnot, kind of wishfully thinking, I suppose, that Pence, because he was in the middle of he was in charge of the presidential transition, and he participated in the campaign, and he was working with Manafort and Flynn and all these guys, that he may be very seriously compromised too. And if we could impeach both Trump and Pence at the same time, Nancy Pelosi becomes president. But I haven't heard any follow-up on that from Democrats. I really think that they need to be focusing on Pence more aggressively, and they're not, to the best of my knowledge. I mean, the big Pence scandal this week is that his wife is now teaching at a Christian academy. Karen Pence is teaching at a Christian academy where you're not allowed to go. You can't send your kids if you respect the rights of gay people, or for that matter, if you or your child are gay, and you can't work there if you're gay, and you have to sign this loyalty oath saying that basically you hate homosexuality, and if that's the biggest scandal that they're coming out after Pence with, I'm not optimistic, Bob.
Wow, I was hoping that he would be in the campaign would be tangled up enough with Trump that he would be effectively kneecapped.
Yeah, I was hoping the same thing, and it may well be the case, but it's going to take some serious investigations, and those are going to start in the next week or two. So hang on to your hat, Bob. Thanks a lot for the call. Bruce in Clinton, Iowa. Hey, Bruce, what's up?
Hey, Tom, first of all, I promise no FDR impressions today.
Okay. What's up?
Well, I've had this thought for a while that if we're ever going to stop the caravans coming up from Central America, that we need a new Monroe-style doctrine for the 21st century in the Western Hemisphere. And I guess I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, the Monroe Doctrine, which was, James Monroe, the guy who was president after James Madison, so that would have been, 1820, yeah, would make sense, yeah. Monroe basically said that anything that happens in the Americas is the business of the United States. We can stick our nose into those things. That was, in retrospect, that was pretty empire-ish. I don't know the phrase. I think it's better for us. We need a National Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We need to basically acknowledge the crimes that we've committed against other people. In this case, during the Reagan administration, utterly devastating the political and legal landscapes in Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador. And we just need to say right up front, this is our responsibility. We ruined these countries. And now these countries are under just insane levels of political and criminal upheaval. And it's the consequence of our behavior in that region. And instead of a Monroe Doctrine kind of thing, I would be in favor of a Marshall Plan kind of thing, where we're going to go in and we're going to help them rebuild their countries in a small d democratic way. Because I mean, to start out, Guatemala, for example, we went in and we overthrew a democratically elected president. Why? Because he was talking about a national health care system. He was a socialist in our, in the opinion of the Eisenhower-Nixon administration.
And I know,
the Reagan administration.
Go ahead. And I know there was certainly a thought we don't want, communism over in the Western Hemisphere.
Right.
But do you think we can do this in some of these countries without military intervention?
Yeah, I think if we went into El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras and said, we're coming with money, we're going to help you build things, which, by the way, is what the Chinese are doing all over the world with their Belt and Road program. Billions, tens of billions of dollars they're spreading around building infrastructure in these countries. If we were to do that in those Central American countries, you would no longer have refugees coming to the United States saying we are fleeing violence. And I think the one big lesson that we have learned, Colombia has learned, there was a big bombing in Colombia yesterday in downtown Bogota. I was in Bogota back in the 80s. I wrote about it in my book, The Prophet's Way. I was working in Bogota, Colombia, and during the time that I was there were 5 bombings within a half a mile of where I was staying downtown. And it was the drug cartels and stuff. It was the fallout of trying to use violence, a so-called war on drugs, to stop drugs. And I think that what we've learned from this is that you can't stop violence with violence. You've got to stop violence with peace, basically. Bruce, I want to get one more caller in here before the end of the show. Tim in Beaverton, Oregon. Hey, Tim, what's on your mind?
Well, I listen to you quite often, Tom, and I appreciate what you're trying to impart to a society that doesn't seem to want to learn anything anymore. Unfortunately, we have all the information in the world at our fingertips, and people are less informed than they were 50 years ago, which is scary.
Yeah.
And a prime example of that is Luther, the guy you were talking to in Arkansas. That's scary stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How many of those guys do you think exist? How many of them are listening to Fox News?
I think the majority of people who watch Fox News believe that to be the case. I mean, when you've got Tucker Carlson going off on white people are the real victims of racism in the United States, you've got a problem.
And another simple comment about Obama, and not many people have brought this up, and let's forget while he was in president, what if a Access Hollywood tape would have come out about Obama a couple of weeks before the election in 2008? What do you think would have happened? His campaign would have been over.
Yeah.
As simple as that.
I mean, look at how they went nuts when he wore a tan suit.
Yeah, they would have probably thrown him in jail, is basically what would have happened. And then one interesting thing that I've studied over the last year or so, Benghazi, Roger Ailes, and Andrew Breitbart. Breitbart and Ailes. Ailes dropped dead in his house. He had a fall. Breitbart dropped dead on a street in L.A. with no medical history, and all that stuff was just covered over. I think they were liabilities to the GOP, and they probably got rid of them. I think
they were both killed by their diets. I mean, both of them were obese. And
the thing is, though, Breitbart was really becoming a lunatic on the airways, and then Ailes, he was thrown out of Fox News, and can you imagine the dossier he probably had?
Yeah. It's the kind of stuff that would be fun to think about if you were going to write a novel, Tim. but I'm not sure how productive it is right now. Yeah, I'm sorry, Tim. I gotta run. It's the end of the show. Thanks so much for being with us today and this week. Next week, the fireworks are just starting to gin up here. And I really believe that we're looking at the end of the Trump presidency. But how much damage is this wounded rat going to do, or this cornered rat going to commit as he goes down? I mean, here he is outing, security, putting the lives of members of Congress at risk. Anyhow, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires you. Get out there, get active, tag, you're it. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you on Monday.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
From UN headquarters in New York.